At 10 years old, Crown Prince Cecil Glo Alfasta was no ordinary child. His mathematics teacher tried to teach him, but Cecil was already inventing formulas that didn't even exist at the time.
What?
So this guy is like a giga genius. Wait a second, let's go back. Hold on. My Princess Seal, no theorem exists. Indeed. I've just created it. 10 years old. Okay, so this is where we're starting, huh? This tutor was so taken aback about how this would change everything, he ran off to go make a report to the society. Most would be at a loss, with their tutor dipping out on them. But Cecil could understand anything after hearing it once, so he didn't need to be lectured for long periods of time. It was all so boring to him. Until one day, his fiancée, the daughter of a marquis, Bertia Ibil Noches, told him she was the villainess.
Guys, is this mean for me to say? She's kind of fat.
She told him it was her role to rip him and the heroine away from each other and leave him completely shocked in the end. He smiled back at her because it was the first time something didn't make sense. Today was the first time he also met Bertia face to face, and it was clear he wasn't the only one who didn't understand what she was saying. He turned back towards her to say standing and chatting wasn't really the thing to do and invited her to tea. She somehow wasn't ready for that. That's where Cecil introduced his personal butler, the green-haired Zeno. Bertia stared at him sternly. Cecil asked what was wrong, and she thought he was a little too composed for his age. She asked if he was possibly also a reincarnation. Reincarnation was another curious idea to him. He explained he was taught that's how royals behave themselves. Zeno thought otherwise. This is how royals behave themselves? Butler. No, it isn't. He thought if there was some other detached, philosophical, 10-year-old prince, no one could stand it. I love how it's implied Cecil has basically Hokage-level thinking at the age of 10. It's like Itachi, munching like a fat pig. Bertia replied she understood. Then, she told him this may shock him, but she had more memories of a past life. In the land where she was born and raised, Japan, there were stories she could watch with moving pictures that were like novels. These otome games were something she enjoyed immensely. Dang, the shot is Cecil. When she regained her memories, that's when she realized she was born in the otome game that depicted this world. That's how she knew the scenario in the future, that Cecil would fall in love with the noble's daughter, the Maiden of Destiny, and that as the villainess, she would turn into a jealous demon and torment her horribly. This would eventually enrage Cecil, leading to the fall of Bertia's family. In short, getting the better of her would allow Cecil and the heroine to find happiness. Even though she was fated to fall, she wanted to do it beautifully and become a first-rate flower of evil. But look at her. She is so excited to be the villain and fall into ruin. This is a passionate story lover. Before this, Cecil had never once been unable to understand what someone was saying. Whether she had an overactive imagination or the power to predict the future, it didn't matter to him. But analyzing, he could see she was aiming to become a person who fits into this scenario of hers. As long as it wasn't something problematic for a future queen, he didn't mind. He asked what exactly was this first-rate flower of evil she mentioned. She told him, strong, noble, and beautiful. And though her path led to destruction, she took it without hesitation. At the thought of the 3 adjectives she mentioned, he took notice of her fat fingers and sloppy eating. Oh my god. So he's on the same page with me. She say strong, noble, and beautiful. He thinks she fat too. He realized he slipped. She grew flush, telling him he had the wrong idea. Bertia was always supposed to be someone who didn't have a chance, and as a character, her appearance was questionable. He thought that sounded sad, and asked if she was alright with that. Clutching her dress, she wasn't. All she spoke of was Bertia from the game. Who she was now was her own person. She admitted in her past life, she tended to hide in her own shell. But Cecil was her support as her chosen male lead. She actually wished for his happiness. That's why she was determined to become an honest, righteous flower of evil. Cecil again thought honest, righteous, and evil didn't make sense. Bertia promised to improve herself and come again, then ran away. Cecil wondered what that was all about. Zeno asked Cecil what he wanted to do, and the prince was intrigued. Bertia had none of the manners necessary to interact with royalty, and he didn't understand many of her words and actions. That's exactly what made her so entertaining to him. He planned to observe her for a while, and if it became necessary, he'd lead her down to the correct path. In his words, Zeno could see he was enjoying himself. And as for Cecil, the sense of unpredictability wasn't bad. Generally, he could do anything on his first attempt, so the world for him was a tedious place. He rarely ever felt a sense of accomplishment. In his eyes, the world lost its color, which is why he hoped Bertia wouldn't betray his expectations. Okay, so now that they kind of knocked out the whole dynamic, I think this premise is actually pretty interesting. So it is a reincarnated villainous story, but we're seeing most things from the prince's point of view, who knows all about it. Yeah, this is gonna be great. 1 year later, Zeno would present him a report from a messenger. Lady Bertia had secluded herself within her home for a year. Cecil was positive, which confused Zeno. But the prince had been keeping tabs on her and told him once he saw her, he'd understand. A few days later, they'd meet with a much slimmer Bertia, who had some kind of fox around her neck. Cecil was impressed. The reports were true. She'd been training the past year with diet and exercise to clean up her appearance. She was eager to know if he mistook her for someone else, and got quickly whacked by her father for her behavior towards the crown prince. The Marquis pleaded with Cecil to forgive his idiot daughter's rudeness. Cecil didn't mind, and thought it was childlike and adorable. This triggered something in her. She wanted him to say that one more time. She wanted him to call her adorable again. Aww. Her father took her aside and told her not to let the prince's appearance fool her. His eyes never smiled. He didn't have the necessary emotions to dote on cute things. He thought Cecil was too cold, and told her to make do with only him calling her adorable. While having tea, Kuro woke up and hopped off her. She apologized, but ever since she took her in, the little creature wouldn't leave her side. So she had Kuro imitate a scarf and brought her with her. Cecil pondered on this. It wasn't a successful imitation, but he knew what it was. He decided to keep quiet about it for now, so it would make things entertaining in the future. He offered Bertia tea and sweets, but the maid's cough signaled she had to sadly focus on her diet. That's why Cecil prepared these sweets made with reduced sugar, telling her he wasn't too particularly fond of sweets himself. Wow, he's so thoughtful. Bertia lit up, excited to munch, and the taste filled her with joy. Cecil thought she wanted to be evil, but felt like she was heading in the opposite direction. Discussing tomorrow's party, she decided as a first-rate villainess, she'd nobly fulfill her duty as his partner. He wondered why she meant to seem reliable, but now he felt anxious. He told her to keep the fact she was a reincarnated villainess a secret between the two of them. Entering high society was a world where you never know what may end up having a harmful result. She was at a loss, so he explained a flower of evil who left herself open to attack would seem inferior, and now she got it. Defeating one's opponent in secret was first-rate, while talking big and digging one's own grave was third-rate. She was going to be different from Bertia in the game by becoming a beautiful, noble flower. He was glad she got it, though he felt her understanding was slightly skewed. Tomorrow was his 11th birthday, and she was excited to celebrate it. Until she remembered that meant she'd be turning 10 soon. She began to tear up, explaining her mother would be dying then. According to the scenario, the cause would be from an epidemic that starts spreading in the summer. Right before her 10th birthday, Bertia's mother would die. She explained the challenge of an infectious disease that evolved, and how it took time to find a method to treat it. The herb they needed for the medicine, the Luana leaf, there just wasn't enough of it to go around. Many of the citizens would die. Cecil was familiar and thought it was definitely a difficult plant to cultivate. In the story, Bertia's father searches frantically for Luana leaves, but he doesn't find any. He asks the king to spare him some, but it doesn't happen, and her mother is buried under the pouring rain. Cecil told her to just prepare now. Saving her mother was more important than the game's scenario. Bertia loved her mother, but she knew if the events twisted, he might not get the ending he was supposed to. Cecil was shocked to see she was concerned about him as well. He offered her a handkerchief and told her to wipe her tears. He was here as her fiancé, and if she ever found herself in trouble, the two of them could think about what to do together. Oh man, guys, this is getting my heart. Another year passed, and at her house, Bertia told Cecil he was so awful. She quickly apologized for coming off so unbecoming of a lady. but he told her it was fine, asking if he'd done something to cause her charming face to crumple. She explained she wanted to develop more of a strategy against the epidemic, but all he ever replied in his letters was, "It's alright." She didn't know what to do. She desperately tried to collect Luana leaf, but didn't have nearly enough. And for some reason, when summer came, the disease didn't spread. And her mother was in perfect health. She didn't understand what was going on. He smiled, telling her not to worry. The epidemic did begin, just like she said, but it simply died down. She was blown away. He used the information she gave him to guess the disease and made medicine for it?
I guess I shouldn't be surprised. He just, I used your information to guess the disease, and I made medicine for it. I don't know why this still surprised me because he is a boy genius, but it's pretty funny.
As soon as it began spreading, the patients all received immediate treatment. She began to shake him, asking what he meant by all that, and he was happy to let her be the only one to let her treat him this way. He told her to relax, and they could talk outside. Going back to when she first told him about her mother dying, he decided to get permission from his father to use the royal greenhouse. His next step was to go to the library to read more up on the Luana leaf. He studied late in the evenings until sometime later, he was able to produce a giant Luana tree. It was the discovery of a century, but Cecil, as always, was pretty nonchalant about it. So basically, he develops a giant tree to cure COVID. This guy is definitely on another level. He wanted to work on medicine next, and asked Bertia about the characteristics of the disease. Then, borrowed knowledge from experts in medicine and pharmacy to identify the disease. Reading a book, he found a mutation of said specific disease, and so, after a number of experiments, easily completed a cure. To be prepared, he needed to next make sure the adults took action. So he pretended that he just happened to take interest in a certain disease, and invited a doctor who was studying into the palace as his teacher. He'd passionately discuss infectious diseases and the possibility of a new strain and how to combat it. Then, tell him about the effects of the Luana leaf he just happened to be obsessed with. Then set it up so that the new disease strain would connect to the Luana leaf, all with the goal of getting the teacher to come to the realization himself. Unfortunately, the doctor didn't get it at first, and Cecil didn't get why. A few months later, the doctor finally realized the Luana leaf could have some effect against this hypothetical disease, and that's how Cecil solved everything. Some more time passed. The first patient with the disease was discovered, and the same doctor gave her thorough medical treatment. Cecil was actually surprised when patient 0 really did appear, because of course, he didn't completely believe Bertia's story. However, Cecil learned a lot. The difficulty from guiding the doctor, and the fact he made Bertia feel so anxious, was likely a result of his own bad habits. He realized when he theorized, he understood too easily and had a tendency to omit explanations. Bertia asked why he would do all that, and he answered, "Why? I have no intention of ignoring my fiancée when she appears so anxious." She thought this was far above what an 11-year-old child should be able to do, but he knew, as the crown prince, he could use the library, and with his father's permission, he could call on brilliant experts for help. Zeno thought this was in no way normal for a normal crown prince. Bertia was still flabbergasted, but she supposed that's what she should expect from the genius known as the android prince. He was curious about that, but told her not to worry. Since her mother was safe, and the harm to the people was kept to a minimum, then it was all fine. She agreed, since everyone has evaded the evil clutches of the epidemic. But he could see she's given up on thinking about it. She was scared, hearing he still had another surprise for her. It was a handmade birthday present. Her eyes widened at what he presented. This was actually a universal antidote. While researching, he found something interesting in the library. It was a small puzzle that opened a vault to a secret part of the library. From there, he gained the knowledge to make this new antidote. Since she was going to become his wife, it was possible that her life would be threatened. He thought it could be a protective charm. The petals flowed as he wrapped it around her neck. He thought it suited her very well. She thanked him and swore upon the necklace to repay the debt of gratitude by making sure to thoroughly rectify the scenario by becoming the most magnificent villainess. Her first step was to make sure her father became a proper villain. She ignored him, saying that he thought losing a chancellor would be too problematic. To say she'd make sure he and the heroine get their happy ending. He could see she wasn't listening at all, but was fine, since it did seem entertaining, after all. Out in a forest, the heroine would find an injured bird. She told it there was nothing to be scared about, and suddenly remembered that you need to like the video and subscribe to my channel, because here on my Shoujo Weekly, I'm covering all the new releases in the shoujo genre. Villainous stories are some of my favorites. That's why I got a whole playlist for you here, filled with action, drama, and romance. Be sure to watch it if you're looking for more. So come on, remember to hit that subscribe, or you're getting isekai'd. Visiting the prince, Marquis Noches let out a huge sigh. It's been a year now since Bertia started recommending evil acts to him. A year since that outcry over the epidemic. Cecil thought time sure passed quickly. The other day, she even gave her father a handmade book for him to read called The Best Things About Being a Villain, Starting Down a Villain's Path by Zero. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. The book was incredibly easy to understand and entertaining to read, featuring clear depictions of the difference between legal means to make money versus illegal means. Cecil thought the numbers on embezzlement and fraud were oddly realistic. Perhaps info she gained from her previous life. Day and night, all she did was talk to her father about becoming a criminal. Cecil could see her actions were intended to keep her scenario from falling. He considered following up to smooth things over. He told the Marquis to not let it worry him too much. He assured him it was just a common adolescent phase where Bertia was attracted to men who were a bit bad. However, Douglas argued if that were true, then why wouldn't she try to make Cecil bad instead of him? That's a good point. But even then, Cecil laid it on smooth that she loved her father very much, and Douglas bought it immediately. Also, he thought Cecil's evil-mindedness tended to leak out, and his daughter must have decided she didn't need to recommend things to him. Switching topics, he brought up that it was time for his daughter's debut into society. He felt moved, but also extremely worried. Cecil told him it'd be alright. He'd support her, though if something interesting happens, he may let her flounder for a little while. We moved to the day of Bertia's social debut. How elated she was made Cecil's eyes widen. He told her she's become quite beautiful, making her flustered. And now, she was suspicious he had a favor to ask of her. But he couldn't right now, because today, she was going to advance her turn father into a villain plan. Cecil found her unfortunate nature so endearing. The people awed as the royal couple came out in matching outfits. Everything went smoothly. So much to the point, Cecil didn't expect Bertia to have no issues with her behavior. Viscount Laurie ComfyTea came forward, telling Bertia she looked lovely. Cecil somehow got irritated. Another man was touching his fiancée. He wondered just how close the two were. She was about to whisper something in the Viscount's ear, and Cecil suddenly pulled her away. He told the man he was terribly sorry, making the excuse Bertia wasn't feeling well, and thus, he'd be taking her away for a while. Privately, she'd ask what brought this on so suddenly, and Cecil told her to answer him honestly. He wanted to know if the information she gathered on being a villain was from the Viscount. She couldn't believe he read her book. She felt so embarrassed. But now, Cecil wanted to know the particulars. When the Viscount came to visit her father, she remembered he was one of the people who pulled her father onto his villainous path. That's why she did everything to become friends with him, where she succeeded at last in getting him to talk about evil deeds. Cecil would then reveal the Viscount was an Epstein disciple, notorious for liking young girls. He was a known pervert, romantically interested in children. He asked if Laurie ever touched her. Bertia's face grew shocked as she remembered the Viscount's lecherous face, and she screamed. On the surface, he seemed like an older man who was nice to children. Cecil couldn't blame her for not realizing. He embraced her, telling her it was all right, and he'd figure something out. Cecil wasn't spineless enough to stand silently by after someone laid a hand on his fiancée. He asked her if she came into contact with anyone else, and she answered no. She hadn't met the others who instigated her father in the game, Count Conmorno and Baron Sagil, yet. Cecil asked her to please stop doing these dangerous things, and she agreed. She didn't want to ever experience anything like this again. Which is why from now on, she was going to be very careful about interacting with them. Oh my god, she's learned nothing. He told her not to, but she told him if she stopped here, his bright future wouldn't happen. She swore to do her best, and Cecil could tell she had no intention of listening to him whatsoever. However, if handled correctly, he thought this would be a good chance to rid the kingdom of rot. Marquis Noches was worried his daughter had done something wrong, but Cecil met with him to discuss this matter. He explained through a certain channel he's heard rumors of Count Conmorno Baron Sagil and Viscount ComfyTea's improprieties, and that they'd been trying to make contact with him. Douglas couldn't believe the Viscount was making inappropriate acts towards his daughter. Cecil told Douglas not to bring this up to Bertia, and this was a ploy to make sure Bertia didn't find out about his own scheming by making sure her father didn't talk. Cecil then said he wanted to get rid of everyone involved, with Douglas's help. He wanted the Marquis to become a spy and find evidence of their wrongdoing, and Douglas got fired up. He'd crush them himself. The groundwork had been laid out. Cecil wanted to keep an eye on those men himself, but soon, he'd begin living in the dorms of Holm Academy. It'd be difficult for him to take action then. 6 months later, walking the campus grounds, he thought it was all so tedious. The quality of education here was high, but as a member of the royal family, he knew the entire curriculum already. He wished Bertia was here. He'd suddenly hear her call, "Prince Cecil!" And he was taken aback. She was storming towards him with her pet, and even though he wanted to embrace her, a royal couldn't lose their composure over something like this. She suddenly told him, "We have a child! We have a baby on the way!" Oh! This is a crazy first statement to come back to. Cecil's eye twitched, and mine would too. She continued on, and while the prince was just thinking he was bored, he had no recollection of wishing for carnage like this. One of the boys said, "That's Prince Cecil for ya. He's a man among men." Dang, aren't they like 12 now? But Cecil wouldn't dare lay hands on his fiancée before marriage. She didn't want to cause him this much trouble. She said it was such a happy event, but she couldn't bring herself to feel honest joy about it. Cecil wanted her to stop saying things that invited further misunderstandings. He gently asked, just who has become pregnant with whose child? He held her close, telling her if he didn't know, he wouldn't know how to help. Look, even her pet wasn't prepared. She apologized for being so silly, and then explained her mother was pregnant with her father's child, of course. Who else? With the others staring at them, she had to clear up this misunderstanding. And now that everything was cleared, Cecil began to drag her away, but not before making sure the other students promised not to let any odd rumors circulate. Cecil wanted Bertia to accompany him back in the carriage on the way back. That way, she could tell him everything as they traveled. Bertia already had a carriage though, since her usual marathon was a little too far to come by foot. Cecil noted it took 2 hours to get here from House Noches by foot. He asked her not to deny him though. He didn't want to be a horrid man who sent his fiancée away when she's come to see him. Her face went bright pink. She was happy he felt that way. But staying with him any longer, she'd die of embarrassment. It made him smile. He promised it was alright. Once it was just the two of them, he'd even give her her first kiss. Whispering her name made her shriek and run away. Cecil thought her reactions were so amusing. Adorable. He couldn't help himself. He told Zeno it was in no way revenge for her causing him to lose his composure earlier. Zeno thought he was so conniving. Bertia. Cecil really liked her name. He decided he'd call her by her first name from now on. 6 months went by, and he'd visit House Noches, where Bertia was holding her baby brother. However, Bertia's face was deeply sullen. This was the first time he entered her room. He took note of the colors she wore often, wondering if the blue and yellow were her favorite, and also wondering if it had to do with his hair and eye color. He questioned what this restless feeling in his heart was. She apologized to him regarding the matter of her little brother, Aneth. Turns out, in the original scenario, House Noches had no heir, and they were supposed to adopt a son from the lowest branch family. But of course, Bertia's mother survived the epidemic, and thus, the entire scenario has collapsed. The adopted brother should have been brought into the house by now and begun attending Holm Academy as Corgain Delis Noches. He would quickly begin to distinguish himself and emerge as a candidate to become Cecil's close aide. Cecil knew it'd be difficult for an untitled family member to enter the academy, and if he was truly exceptional, it'd be a waste of talent. Bertia then said avoiding a route where he and the heroine end up together was good. Cecil then asked her about that, since she said he was supposed to end up with the heroine, and so she explained there were a number of capture targets depending on the heroine's action. The person she ended up with could change. Cecil couldn't believe she forgot to mention something so important. He thought there was no need to break off their engagement, since the heroine could just be someone else's partner. But she couldn't let that happen, or else something would happen to him. She began to sweat, telling Cecil it was nothing, and that in any case, she'd make sure he and the heroine got together. It was obvious to him she was trying to gloss over this. He asked who the other captured targets were, and we learned it was all those destined to be his close aides. There was Val Nokins, Charles Loano, Nelt Crumb, and second prince, Sean Turcoing Alfasta. In this matter, the scenario should generate a compelling force so that when the time comes, an event would trigger and draw them all to the heroine. But if the same force was trying to have Corgain adopted into her family, then she could only imagine something bad happening to Aneth. She's been so afraid this whole time. Cecil could see that now. Very like her. He figured Corgain just needed to attend Helm Academy and become a candidate to be his aide. He had an idea and told her to leave it to him. When Corgain Delis Martin came home, he'd kneel immediately at a greeting by the crown prince. Cecil heard the people of these lands been complaining about their local lord, and since he was Bertia's distant relative, he wanted to ask him about that. Corgain couldn't believe Cecil would come all the way himself, and Cecil answered he had to listen to the people's voices as a member of the royal family. Corgain explained the lord here was very logical, a person worthy of respect, but just had an irredeemably horrible way of expressing himself. That was likely the reason he garnered unnecessary ill feelings. Earlier, in order to fulfill their taxes, some villagers harvested crops that weren't fully grown yet, and his lord scolded them about it. These crops would have more than doubled in volume if left for another 2 weeks. If they'd come to him for help, he would have accommodated them, and the farmers' lives would have become more abundant. What the lord told them was quite constructive, but unfortunately, he spoke so roughly, shouting, "Use your heads a little, you fools!" They ended up storming out of his office. This all coincided with exactly what Cecil's messenger informed him of. Corgain was able to clearly distinguish objective facts. "You pass, Corgain," Cecil said, adding he had high hopes for him and now had a request to make. He wanted Corgain to be adopted into a noble house and work as his informant on illegal matters in the kingdom. Corgain fell to his knees and wept, admitting he had given up. He thought he'd live like this for the rest of his life. He never imagined that Cecil would choose a non-noble from one of the lowest houses. He swore to repay this debt of gratitude with lifelong loyalty. And so, Cecil informed Bertia of his attendance at the academy. Just as the scenario dictated, Bertia was so joyous, especially since it seemed her father was on better terms with the villainous nobles more than ever. So now, if they could just avoid the reverse harem route, everything would be perfect. Cecil was confused. Bertie explained the reverse harem route was when one woman is in love with and loved by all male leads at the same time. Such a greedy route. Cecil thought that was unthinkable, since the queen having an affair would be treasonous. Even so, Bertie explained that because he'd love her, he couldn't leave her, choosing to share her instead. That route did exist. He asked what idiot would shake the kingdom for a love affair, and she divulged about some backstory involving the use of charm magic. But such magic didn't exist in this world. Cecil thought a light spirit might be able to achieve something similar. They purify the wicked and bestow a sense of euphoria on the righteous. The light of healing. Using that sense of euphoria, one could draw people to them, as if by magic. Bertia couldn't believe spirits existed, and Cecil was again confused, since they were both contracted by one. He mentioned she hadn't told him where she found Kuro. She explained that it was in a forest near the mansion. Kuro licked a wound for her, and that's when she named her. Well, turns out because of that, she made a contract with a high-level darkness spirit. These contracts were formed by giving them blood and a name. Bertia had no idea. Zeno also happened to be Cecil's contracted spirit. This was definitely too much for her brain to keep up with. With a single gesture, he had Zeno summon books for Bertia to study and learn about spirits. She wasn't ready for all that. Still, a romantic relationship with a heroine who uses light spirit powers to half brainwash people. He thought that it was such an extreme method to attempt on him. In town, the heroine would chase after Pichon, accidentally stepping in a puddle and splashing a bystander. The man was going to get angry, but Pichon reacted and would use light magic to charm him. He'd suddenly kneel and lovingly ask for her name. The heroine smiled, telling him Heronia Inderon. One particular morning, Cecil gave the welcoming speech to the newly enrolling students of Helm Academy. Since he was student council president, Bertia gleamed just watching him. In the student council office, we get introduced to the male leads of the game. Charles praised Bertia as Cecil's flower, complimenting her for drawing more attention than anyone else. Cecil's younger brother Sean thought she was so pretty, and because she was going to be his older sister-in-law, he wanted to be friends with her. Nell thought people like her with brisk, decisive energy made him a bit uncomfortable. Val thought she was magnificent with her beautiful legs and slender waist. Charles was surprised. He thought Val was only interested in combat, and teased the points Val was interested in was typical for a boy. Val responded, "Of course." For a noble's daughter, Bertia seemed to have trained quite a lot. Cecil knew the truth and was looking forward to Charles's reaction when he learned of her true nature. Charles asked Corgain about her, since he was technically part of the Noches family. He'd answered that his house was from the lowest branch, so that never happened. He told Charles he was interfering with his work, and to please not speak with him further. Cecil would get up to let the guys know he was off to see his adorable fiancée. The guys couldn't believe it. Aside from Cecil acting amiable, he always looked like he wasn't interested in other people. But Cecil would tell him he was interested in those who seemed entertaining. Charles suggested they all go visit her and pay their respects. Sean really wanted to go as well. His smile so bright these days, people referred to him having an angel smile, while in contrast, they called Cecil's a fallen angels. With the boys making their way, Cecil would take notice of the sparkling Heronia chasing after Pichon. He would give Corgain a brief command in response. He then greeted Bertia where she was having tea, and she was totally caught off guard. While there were very distinct individuals at this party, he thought the one who drew the eye the most had to be Kuro. In accordance to Bertia enrolling at the academy, this was the form Kuro was taking to stay by her side more appropriately. No one else could see her ears and tail, however. Bertia thought he was supposed to come later, but Cecil thought that was strange, since this was the time they arranged to meet. The purple-haired woman cut in next to give the prince a greeting. Her name was Joanna Kurtzwarn, the daughter of a duke. She and Cecil were second cousins. Joanna explained Bertia thought he'd be so busy he wouldn't come, and was even worried. She seemed restless, looking around, and then grew downcast. She thought Bertia was so adorable in that state. Bertia tried to stop her from saying more, and Cecil could see Joanna got amused by Bertia just the same. Bertia was excited to share with him that she'd made a lot of friends, or rather, minions. He could see she used minion instead of friend to try to make it sound worse than it actually was. He was sure she wanted to give it a flower of evil spin, but told her she shouldn't refer to her precious friends that way. She then felt bad and apologized, but Joanna told him to not let it trouble him. These ladies were all members of the Society for Adoring Lady Bertia. Red-haired Silica Lunea, green-haired Cynthia Sornelis, and brown-haired Anne Kogareth. They were an unofficial society more akin to a fan club, their modus operandi being to watch over Lady Bertia as she flourishes and grows. Bertia was extremely popular with all genders. Anne thought watching her was healing. Cynthia thought Bertia's kindness showed through, and it made her feel at ease. Silica didn't want to leave Bertia on her own, and felt she must watch over her, so she grew up just as honest as she was now. Bertia couldn't believe Silica saw herself as her mother. Cecil then pulled Bertia aside and congratulated her enrollment with blue roses. She got excited. This had to mean he completed the Meet Cute event, though the color of the roses was a little different than in the game. Blue roses were a legendary class item. He got them for her because she liked this color, and in all the world, there was only this one pot of these roses. She felt bad for accepting something so precious, but she loved them. They were the beautiful color of his eyes. With the ladies all gushing over her, she swore that it wasn't what she meant, but she just liked a pretty blue. That's why she liked it. With the scenario changing here and there, she was worried about what might happen, but felt relieved he successfully completed the Meet Cute event. He asked what that was, and she was shocked. Surely on the way to the party, he came across a pretty girl frolicking with a white bird. He remembered that girl was laughing in an oddly high voice and talking to a white bird. She seemed suspicious, so he had Corgain report her to a teacher. The girl kept glancing at people in an impolite manner, and he found it quite irritating. Bertia told him this was a dire matter. That person was the heroine of the game, the Maiden of Destiny. As soon as he saw her, he was supposed to take a red rose from the bouquet meant for Bertia and give it to her. That's the Meet Cute event. However, with him giving Bertia a potted plant, pulling out a single flower was impossible. Bertia asked if he felt anything from her. Did seeing her frolic with a bird, so unlike other ladies, spark his interest? He answered that a young lady who appeared wearing a live fox wrapped around her neck had a far greater impact on him. She thought the Meet Cute event was in shambles. Cecil meant to make her happy, but felt bad for troubling her. She told him it was fine though, allowing herself to be a little happy with his gift. Still though, the saddened look did not leave his eyes. In the student council room, Cecil would later welcome Joanna. Seeing her with Bertia for tea was unexpected for him, but she didn't think so. The moment she first met Bertia, she was completely charmed after Bertia saved her from nobles who were trying to hit on her. And Bertia wrote, "In season now, a complete collection of the best spots in the royal capital," which was what caused some of the members to join the society. Cecil cut to the chase. He was here to ask if there were any members within who posed a risk. Joanna didn't like that he was prying into a maiden's secrets. Cecil thought Joanna seemed far more like a villainess than Bertia did, and quickly countered that he'd tell Sean she'd been investigating him. She wasn't expecting that. He already knew Joanna adored his younger brother, and now she was crashing out, telling him this was why she hated black-hearted schemers. She couldn't believe he and the pure, adorable Prince Sean were blood relatives. And on top of all that, his fiancée Bertia even loved him. He teased her for being jealous, and it really hit her hard. She gave in, saying there were no dangerous elements in the society. She instructed them quite thoroughly. However, there were some who envied Bertia's popularity. On Joanna's blacklist was Heronia Inderon, a baron's daughter. Joanna described this list to contain ladies who admired Cecil or fiancés who harbored affection for Bertia. The gentlemen redirected their displeasure with Cecil towards Bertia. Cecil thought there'd be fun to come, but Joanna didn't see how he was so nonchalant, considering the predicament was dire for his fiancée. He didn't see it that way though. Since Bertia had the whole fan club beside her, he could relax, leaving it to Joanna. After her leave, he thought about how he had Bertia study Kuro's powers to protect her from Heronia's light of healing. Kuro's affinity is dark, which excelled at defense. She'd offer great protection, but as long as the existence of spirits must be hidden from the general populace, she wouldn't be able to use those powers openly against a human opponent. He pondered on what move to make next, though. On his way to meet Bertia, he'd spot Heronia sleeping against a tree, sitting down where he agreed to meet Bertia, but instead finding Heronia taking a nap. He wondered what his fiancée was trying to set up. Hiding behind the flowers in front of him, Heronia was coughing in a stupidly obvious manner that made it clear it was a setup. Cecil thought to read a book, but Bertia would suddenly scream over a hairy caterpillar climbing on her head. Cecil wiped it off, teasing that he'd driven off the bad bug that dared frighten her. She was so thankful, but now he asked if she was done playing hide and seek. Meanwhile, Heronia was still doing the out loud cough, hack, hack, until she'd eventually shout, "Oh, I just can't seem to wake up. I wonder if perhaps a prince might appear to wake me." Bertia asked if he shouldn't go and wake her, but he ignored that completely. It was so rare for her to invite him on a date. He'd been looking forward to it. He'd completely overthrow Bertia's plot by inviting her to tea. He had some delicious imported sweets, and she got way too eager. Heronia was pissed that the villainess was walking away happy, but Cecil just did not care. On another day, Cecil stared at Bertia endearingly as she stared at the clock. She'd go, "Oh my, silly me. I have forgotten something, but I have something to do after this, so I cannot go retrieve it. Oh, I know. Prince Cecil, can I ask you to get it for me?" Cecil and Zeno were dying because her acting was entirely wooden. He'd step out, and who was waiting for him? Ya guessed it, Heronia. She told him she never imagined seeing him here. A girl outside would rush back to the classroom because the teacher told her to lock it, and she totally forgot. So now, Cecil was stuck with Heronia. She'd say, "Oh, whatever shall we do, Your Highness? We've been locked in." He could see she seemed quite happy, all things considered. She would thank him for the lovely rose he gave her the other day, but he never did anything like that. This girl is max delusional, telling him it made her so happy she had it on her windowsill. And with the sky as a backdrop, the red was even more beautiful. He could see she was trying to force something that never happened into existence. That wasn't even the color of the roses he gave Bertia. He took note of the bird that must be the light spirit. With him smiling at her, she told him Pichon really didn't like most people, but he seemed special. She was about to ramble her love for him, not expecting Cecil to rush down the tree outside the window. She'd shout, asking what she was supposed to do up there all alone. However, he'd only think of how that ruined his gloves. He'd tell the teacher in front of him to go unlock the classroom. A year would pass since Bertia began her little tricks. She asked what happened to the heroine, and he just called her the girl with the bird, as if she were an indistinguishable side character, and say the two of them hadn't even introduced themselves to each other. Within Hom Academy, most of the rules of high society still applied. The extreme of these rules is that aside from administrative necessity, those of lower status must never speak to those of higher status. Unless you are introduced, acting as if you don't know each other is polite. According to this rule, Heronia and Cecil were still strangers, though she didn't seem like she was going to abide by proper manners. Bertia asked why. She guided him to so many event spots, and he shot back she'd been caught. So all the things that happened were on purpose? She was at a loss for words. He sighed, admitting he had thoughts about this, which was why he was maintaining a distance from the heroine. He asked Bertia to please watch over him. She could see he must have some profound plan. After all, he'd surely never let his beloved princess get away. And he assured her, keeping her unaware that his adorable princess was her and only her. He'd never let her get away. He wondered why, as of late, watching Bertia fight so hard to put him together with Heronia made part of him enjoy it, but also part of him was unamused. It wasn't simply that he found interacting with Heronia tedious. The tightness in his chest was more than that. He didn't understand what this emotion could possibly be. Bertia has been working at bringing Cecil and the Baron's daughter, Heronia, closer for roughly a year now. At the same time, she was also fighting to make progress with his personal aid candidates. She suddenly told him, "Your Highness, I will become Love's Cupid." And yet again, these were words he didn't quite understand. Bertia devoted every thought to ensuring he and Heronia's union would be guaranteed. He didn't need that kind of devotion, though. A brilliant idea came to her. The other capture targets merely needed to have other wonderful partners. So wonderful, they wouldn't have time to be drawn to the heroine. He realized by Cupid, she meant someone who acted to bring people together. She thought about starting to devote her efforts to bringing Vald and Cynthia together. They were already engaged, but didn't know each other very well. She left, excited to get started, and would be greeted by Anne, who seemed a bit down. The next day, Cecil would show up with Vald on his date with Cynthia. Cynthia turned out to be quite the skilled horse rider, and Bertia didn't understand. She was supposed to have a weak constitution because of the epidemic a few years ago. That didn't happen. Shouldn't that fact have answered her own question? Cynthia told them since being born, she's never contracted a serious illness. Bertia is so dumb, the prince had to remind her that he basically cured COVID. Now she was depressed because her game knowledge was useless here. Her plan was to have Val teach her horse riding, but since there was no teaching needed, Cecil thought about getting some up-close time with her. Val and Cynthia would declare a challenge to each other and sprint off. Cecil would also speed up so they wouldn't get left behind, and took a dangerous leap to enjoy Bertia's scream. Despite Cynthia losing, she had a lot of fun and invited Val to race her again. He was more than happy to. He'd put more training into it as well. Bertia, meanwhile, was still feeling a little weak. Cecil thought her reactions were so amusing. He may have gone a bit too far. She'd bounce back, though, because this Love's Cupid mission was a huge success. The two would spot Charles walking with yet another woman Cecil had never seen before. He thought Bertia was watching him with quite the expression. The next day, Charles came across Anne and noticed she seemed a bit pale. If she was worried about something, he'd be willing to hear her out. Any advice she needed, he'd resolve it with a whoosh and a bang. She smiled at him. He's always tried to cheer her up. However, this was something she needed to solve herself. Her father told her she needed to decide what she wanted to do with her betrothal to his older brother. It came by letter, so it was time for her to steel her resolve. Charles looked distraught, and Bertia would cut in to ask why he wasn't saying anything. They weren't expecting her. She told him he was the one who needed to resolve. In his youth, Charles could only watch as his older brother would leave with a woman, despite this particular day being the day his engagement candidates would be over at their home. The brother told Charles just to make some excuses for him as he went to woo this girl off alone. Charles thought his brother was hopeless, and seeing Anne was tearful with him walking away, he thought to cheer her up with a chat. With Bertia revealing he obviously liked Anne, he complained to Cecil. Having feelings for his older brother's potential fiancée was no laughing matter. That's why he's tried to forget her as quickly as possible by dating other women. But no matter what he did, there was no one he felt more strongly about than Anne. She was so dear to him that he hated her in equal measure. For her to have stolen his heart so completely, and to know he could never have her. Cecil saw Charles as usually easygoing and detached. He never imagined he was hiding such passionate, devoted feelings. Even worse, Anne and Bertia were standing behind him this whole time, and Cecil completely missed the timing to tell him. This is so stupid. Man, look at Anne's face, though. This is the face of a girl who's been waiting for this. Bertia called him utterly pathetic, but he knew if Anne married a second son like him, then the best she could ever be is the wife of a count. He turned back to respond she'd be much happier as the wife of a duke, having no idea Anne was there the entire time, completely flustered. Bertia told him economic stability was a necessity, but having love is the thing that made women happy. Plus, his older brother was an actual playboy through and through. Would he really accept him taking Anne? She reasoned that instead of her being a duchess married to an adulterous man, she would rather be a countess married to a gentleman who truly loves her. Anne meekly responded yes. Cecil then told Charles, while rank may be important, if he secured a position as the future king's personal aide, that would likely suffice in terms of social status. Whether he would reach that would be up to him. Charles knelt before Anne, telling her he's long been consumed with love for her. Aww. He swore to become a man worthy of proposing to her, and asked her to watch over him while he did. She placed his hand on his, expressing she understood the value of a political marriage, but if possible, she wanted to see what a happy marriage full of love might be like. She wanted to give it some thought, and just hearing that gave him the strength to become the Demon King's manservant. Of course, the Demon King would be Cecil. Mission success, even though the manner was quite forced. On another day, Bertia would greet Prince Jean. He was joyous over some rare sweets someone gave him. That's when Joanna entered scene. Oh no, aren't they like distant cousins? Bertia trying to set up the Alabama route. Sean got somewhat uncomfortable and made an excuse to leave. Run, man, don't do the incest route. Bertia couldn't believe he was acting this way towards a woman who might become his fiancée. Joanna told Bertia it didn't bother her at all, but either way, Bertia was going to come up with some kind of plan to help them get along. Nelt and Silica happened to be walking by. It's been so hot lately, his appetite's been low, but she insisted he at least eat the sweets she made for him. That gave Bertia a great idea. Operation Make a Gift of Handmade Sweets. Since Sean liked sweets, this would help Joanna become friends with him. Silica would be leading here, since she was quite skilled. What she gave Nelt this morning were cookies with vegetables in them. He didn't really like vegetables, so she researched in hopes that he'd be able to eat more of them. Preparing cookie batter, Silica asked why Sean acted weird around Joanna. Joanna believed she must have pressed him too hard, but she wouldn't get into that now. Silica found the more effort she put into becoming a proper lady, the more Nelt seemed afraid of her. The two were childhood friends, and since Nelt was mostly a loner introvert, she'd often be his conversation partner. She got lost just thinking about those times in their youth. 1 hour later, they'd stare at Silica's perfect cookies, Bertia's okay batch, and Joanna's burnt to a crisp. The girls tried to cope by saying Joanna's were probably only bad in appearance, but one taste test left them all depressed. Joanna's always been able to succeed at things to a certain extent, but her cooking left much to be desired. They'd encourage her to keep going though. Cecil would get a look at Joanna's handmade cookies with a full report from Zeno. And after some time passed, she'd present a whole new basket of cookies to Sean. She'd have him try one now, and he'd respond it was very dry. She apologized and explained she made them herself. She knew he loved sweets and was hoping to please him with them, but it was another failure. She began her leave, but Sean stopped her. The evening was particularly hot. It was unusual for the season. Nelt was also unwell. He'd been staying up all night, every night, dealing with complaint letters from his father. Bertie and Silica came to visit, bringing plenty of sweets. Silica would then nag Nelt a bit, telling him not to leave things scattered all over the floor. But he had enough. He told her she scared him, and he hated it. He wanted her to stay away from him if she detested him this much. She lost it with him telling her that just because they grew up together didn't mean she could meddle in everything. He found it annoying. Dang, I felt that hurt. The air in the room became awkward. Cecil could tell he was irritable at the moment, but this was too far. Silica had tears dripping down her face, and Bertia scolded Nelt, asking why he couldn't see Silica's kindness and love. Unknowing, he responded, "Love?" Bertia went on, saying Silica was the one always cleaning up the snacks he spilled. He ate the cookies she made, gave him a handkerchief to make sure his books didn't get dirty. If such devotion wasn't love, then what was all this? Silica tried to explain that assessment was all wrong, and that she just had this type of personality. But Charles added he now completely understood how Silica was feeling right now. She squealed again they had it all wrong, and took Bertia with her out of the room. She'd scold her on understanding the nature of a maiden's heart. Bertia nodded frantically in understanding. Silica took her own fault in this as well. They weren't children anymore. She thought she'd been far too meddlesome, and decided to keep her distance from Nelt for a while. Nelt was up all night thinking about Silica. He only now realized she usually made tea that helped him sleep. He hadn't seen her once today, including this morning. Not hearing a voice he always heard felt so strange. With him nodding off, he'd wake up to a blanket placed over him, thinking it was Silica. But it was just Charles. Silica always covered him with a blanket like that. She's always helped him, but he never noticed. Cecil told him to tell her just that. Nelt would find her outside. She apologized to him immediately, but he told her he was in the wrong. He felt terrible for saying those horrible things before, and admitted he couldn't see how much she helped him. He was sorry for being so dense, and said he'd try his best not to get angry from now on. And so, he asked, "Will you stay by my side forever?" She happily accepted. Bertie and Cecil were watching from afar. She thought it was time to throw a congratulatory party, but he wondered if she'd go overboard again. The two would then notice Sean and Joanna being friendly with each other. Bertia didn't understand. She thought Operation Make a Gift of Handmade Sweets was a failure. Cecil apparently spoke to Sean a little yesterday. Joanna's confidence always made Sean feel inferior. However, as he was consoling her after her failure in baking sweets, he said he was able to see her as a normal girl. He also said he felt a desire to protect her spring up within him. Cecil gave all the credit to Bertia. Bertia's love Cupid was something akin to running rampant, but in the end, one could call it success. However, Cecil wasn't yet aware of the tremendous ill will that had begun to grow within Heronia. One evening, two girls were looking at the latest magazine with recommended hotspots and stylish sweets. Just reading it was tons of fun. They heard this was made and produced by Lady Bertia and were so impressed. Until Heronia cut in to go, "Oh, whoa, I heard she actually made her attendants make it." And with a sullen, tearful expression, she told the two Bertia often bullied her because Bertia was jealous of her loveliness and popularity. Oh nah, now she's lying. It was around this time that Heronia, the Baron's daughter, began behaving more appalling towards Bertia. She made false accusations and spread malicious rumors. Cecil expected the villainess and heroine to be at odds, but this was a bit much. Corgain interrupted Cecil's thoughts to deliver the plan for the middle school student council. This spring, Cecil would be advancing to high school. The middle school student council was currently being led by Corgain. Corgain was a little embarrassed to ask this next. He politely requested permission to let Bertia call him Dear Brother Cor. Cecil declined it, sensing the notion would be distinctly unamusing for him, but now asked if Bertia was the one who brought it up. Corgain, of course, confirmed. Lately, it's been almost every day. She kept asking, "Please let me call you my dear brother Cor." Corgain would constantly reject this, but she became so obviously saddened, it pained him to do it. Cecil wondered why, despite talking about Bertia, this topic wasn't fun at all. He's learning you can't be so selfish with love. The rest of the council came in, and Cecil took notice of Charles's unusual earring. He told Cecil it wasn't just him. Vald and Nelt had them too. Their earrings all shined, but Charles was surprised Cecil hadn't received one. He was not happy about that. Man's letting off JoJo villain aura. Charles asked if he was actually mad, and now Cecil had to contemplate this. He realized he wasn't often shaken by emotion, so he hadn't noticed. What he was feeling was discontent and displeasure. With Bertia enjoying snacks he brought, Cecil would mention Corgain's dilemma. She explained that, unlike in the game, she wasn't his younger sister, but just a distant relative. That's why she was trying to secure a position as his sister, so she could block his interactions with the heroine. Cecil took note of this, since she was trying to constantly force him to be with the heroine instead. Bertia then added in her previous life, she never had siblings, so she's always longed for one. Cecil told her if she really craved a big brother, she could call him Dear Brother Cecil. Bertia lit up, but she stopped herself and shook it off. She told him Cecil was Cecil, and he was her fiancé, not her big brother. His eyes widened. He told her she could call him Syl instead. He wouldn't allow her to call Corgain big brother, so this would have to do. Bertia shook and stammered as Cecil continued to smile at her, waiting. When she burst out calling him Lord Syl, he patted her head, telling her, "Well done." Then after, he brought up the fact she had something she hadn't given him yet, and that when he learned he was the only one who hadn't received anything, it made him quite sad. She told him it wasn't like that. She just thought he didn't need it, and got a little overconfident in the design. He told her he did need it, and pulled the necklace right from her neck. The earrings she made matched both their hair and eye colors, along with the red thread of destiny, linking it all together. He thought she thought of the most adorable things, and heard she's imbued everyone's earring with dark defense powers to block Heronia's charm magic. She even handed them out to her fan club. Bertie admitted that was true, but there was no need to protect him from her, so she thought it would be alright not to give Cecil his. She didn't want him to become a mere puppet though, and so he told her it was fine for him to accept it. That way, he could pursue the woman of his own volition. He placed the earring on Bertia's ear and had Zeno bless it. That triggered Kuro to get defensive over Bertia, but Cecil assured her it was fine. He just had Zeno use magic to make sure her earring never fell out. Dang, Cecil always thinking ahead about keeping her forever. Bertia began to panic. If they could never take their earrings off, they'd never escape the accusations of being a thoroughly besotted couple. Yeah, Bertia, that's his plan. Cecil found them being a couple bound by destiny to be amusing. She clamored on about how the heroine would go on a different route, but he ignored it and called her Tia. She couldn't believe he was using this timing to call her a pet name. The impact was devastating for her though. As he began to leave for class, she kept trying to tell him he had to remove the earring, and he completely ignored her again. It was just as he thought. Hearing things from her was much more amusing than hearing them from someone else. He'd get stopped in the hall by a messenger with a letter from His Majesty, the King. An unexpected message. He was being ordered to study abroad in a neighboring country for 4 months. We moved to him getting a tour from the neighboring country's duke, who explained alcohol was one of their country's specialties. The man mentioned hearing since the price of alcohol has risen, there were voices of dissatisfaction rising in Cecil's kingdom. It was plain as day as to what this man was doing. Cecil could see once this kingdom took root among people with its low prices, they'd raise prices. Those who became accustomed to the taste would buy even if a little pricier. The man was caught off guard. Cecil responded, that's simply what was in this man's best interest. But his own kingdom had been investing a lot of effort into brewing alcohol as well. He wanted to show the Duke the next time he'd visit them. The Duke nervously continued the tour. Cecil knew, with the dubious air of dealings that have commenced here, he'd been sent to keep things in check. He'd also been advancing negotiations in a manner that was advantageous to his kingdom. But even so, Cecil's grown bored of it all. Right now, the thing he looked forward to the most was letters from Bertia and the reports he received about her from his messengers. In this latest letter, Bertia described Heronia as being popular with everyone again. He'd then read the letter from the messenger. In his absence, Bertia's position has worsened because Heronia has been trying to foist a number of indiscretions about her. These included a torn-up textbook, dead bugs planted in loose-leaf tea, pebbles put into shoes, and other misconduct. The harassment was now a common occurrence. The zealous supporters of Heronia and Lady Bertia's protectors were in conflict. Cecil thought Tia must have realized she's being harassed at this point. He wished she'd be more honest and come to him for advice. He was really bothered by the fact Heronia was trying to make Bertia the villain, even though she'd never done any direct bullying before. He wanted to act. 1 week later, Bertia welcomed Cecil back. He asked if anything unusual happened, but wasn't pleased to hear her say nothing at all. He told her about the reports, but she assured him that as the villainess, it meant things were moving in a good direction. She told him Heronia wasn't doing anything wrong. Cecil offered to handle the matter, but Bertia told him not to. She needed to set the example of evil, and once she turned the tables on Heronia, she wanted him to be there to comfort her so they could grow closer. Cecil couldn't understand why Bertia was protecting someone who was trying to hurt her. He questioned why she wouldn't rely on him. With a cold snap, he responded, "You're telling me to become more friendly with someone who's hurting my fiancé?" She told him she was only his fiancé for the moment, and that he should take care of his future fiancé. He interjected, telling her to stop. He would say it as many times as it took. She was his fiancé, and in his mind, she was the person he should be protecting. Despite her seeming sweaty and nervous, she told him she was a strong woman and had no need for his help, and so he told her to do as she wished. He stepped up, making the excuse he lost his appetite, and he'd excuse himself. He thought this was so strange, asking himself what he was so worked up about. It had been a month since he returned. The harassment directed at Bertia continued unchanged, but he's decided not to interfere in the slightest. He'd overhear some girls scolding Heronia for not submitting her school fair form. It was causing trouble for Bertia and the others who were organizing everything. Heronia feigned ignorance, saying she never received the form, but the girl called out her lie. Heronia was told over and over to submit it by the end of last week. Heronia used this chance to say Bertia was tormenting her again, but the girl calling her out thought she was abhorrent. Heronia began to cry her annoying crocodile tears, and her controlled simps tried to cheer her up. Guys, this is why you gotta ignore people who try to get sympathy from crying. I don't care if they're a girl, a child, a pregnant woman, or a man. Evil sympathy baiters need to be ignored or thrown in jail. Cecil could tell by the boys' eyes they were under the influence of charm magic. Bertia would ask what all the commotion was, and Heronia accused her of scheming again. But Silica and Cynthia could see she was the one creating these stupid situations for herself. Bertia called for them to stop. She cleared her throat and told them she'd never run nor hide. Heronia was her prey, and she'd confront her herself. Bertia was very proud. She thought that was such a villainousy line. Heronia was about to continue on about how cruel Bertia was being, but the other girls were enamored by Bertia. No matter how cruelly she was treated, she always took it upon herself to confront it fair and square. Heronia was crushed hearing them call her virtuous. It was so bad, her animation went low quality. They applauded her for protecting Heronia to make sure she wasn't outnumbered and attacked, and promised to work hard to become kind, strong women, just like Bertia. Heronia scoffed and took off. Having observed the whole thing, Cecil would check on Heronia to see her viciously stabbing Bertia's chair with a knife. Bruh, she crazy. Zeno suggested they stop her. However, Cecil wouldn't. Bertia already told him she didn't want his help. Heronia ran outside, and he told her if she took it too far, she'd end up all the worse for it. He didn't intend to threaten her. It just happened. He realized entrusting things to others while taking no action was tedious. Zeno wished Cecil would just be more honest with himself. Sean would burst into Cecil's office, asking him to do something. Heronia's attacks on Bertia pained both him and Joanna deeply. Cecil explained Bertia told him she wanted to handle things herself, but Sean couldn't understand. He thought Bertia was special to him. Cecil admitted he hated that his fiancée was hurting, but what else could he do? Sean could now see the fact Bertia refused to rely on Cecil made him feel lonely. Cecil couldn't believe it. He actually did feel a bit lonely. Charles suddenly came rushing in. He was sweating and panting. He told Cecil Bertia fell down the stairs. Cecile stood coldly at the door before him, before telling Tia he was coming in. Bertia thanked him for troubling himself to come and see her. He asked what happened. She answered she made a little blunder. There were some things that needed to be carried out of the student council room, but Lord Fanel was there, so it wasn't an issue. Cecile remembered Fanel Rode was the son of a count, a member of the Society for Adoring Lady Bertia. He'd have him thoroughly investigated later. Once they finished their task, Bertia was on her way back to the student council room, and a female student came up from behind and bumped into her on the stairs. Bertia clenched her blanket, but quickly shifted her attitude to tell Cecile she was quite alright. Because Kuro quickly casted protective magic on her, Bertia missed the perpetrator's face, since she was looking down, but managed to squeak out the perpetrator's hair was pink blonde and build also greatly resembled that of Lady Heronia. Stammering, she went on, saying, "Just as I thought, the villainess must be in conflict with the heroine." Her body shook all the while. Cecile grabbed her, saying he couldn't leave this alone any longer. He didn't know what this feeling was, but when she was hurt, it was the first time he knew the pain of harm befalling something he delighted. Since she told him she was going to do as she liked, he was going to take action of his own will as well. He gathered everyone in the student council room to assist with this personal revenge. Everyone was eager. Even Corgain was fired up. Joanna was ready to crush the rabble who would dare hurt Bertia. Sean told them they should take care of Heronia now, but to their surprise, Cecile said it wasn't her. Her actions consistently aimed to worsen Tia's social standing, which has led to the second-order effect of others directly harassing her. The one who pushed Bertia was Ilyn Silsberts, a viscount's daughter. With that cleared up, they'd now prepare the dish. 1 week later, Heronia slammed Bertia's table, demanding to know why there was a rumor going around that she pushed her. Heronia continued to harass her, but this was not a part of Cecile's plan, just a mere coincidence. His conspirators have already lured Miss Ilyn to the courtyard. As for what happened, he discovered everything after investigating Fanil. Fanil was the object of Ilyn's one-sided love. On that day, Ilyn was following Tia in order to harass her and caught sight of the happy face of the object of her affections. She gave into her rage and pushed Tia. The nerve she had to do this to Cecile's fiancé. Cecile made his move, confidently telling Heronia to please cease her baseless accusations against Bertia. Heronia smirked and quickly put on her little pick-me, "Lady Bertia is about to entrap me" act while Pichon shot his magic. Cecile thought he shouldn't get too close until he noticed Kuro's defenses completely nullified the effect. Responding to her statement, he told Heronia that was impossible. They hadn't spoken the name of the perpetrator, so Bertia had no idea Heronia was rumored in this matter. He called out to everyone listening. He knew they were curious about the truth behind the rumors. He was going to resolve it all right now. With him clearing up it wasn't Hironia who pushed Bertia, she started getting all gushy over him. And while Bertia described someone with similar features to Hironia, she never said it was her. Cecile thought about how, if Tia declared Hironia had done it, she would become the villainess she longed to be, but she didn't. Eileen was at a loss with Cecile approaching her. She told Fanil she was feeling bad and tried to leave, but he stopped her. Nothing could begin without her here. Cecile thanked him. The only thing he wanted to know from Eileen is if she found the act of committing a crime and framing someone else entertaining. She was horrified, but shifted the blame back to Hironia, trying to do everything she could to save face. Joanna stepped in next to say they've been watching her for the past week. They observed Eileen occasionally going into a changing room or restroom, and Hironia coming out with no one left inside. They witnessed this person who exchanged places with her tamper with Bertia's belongings. Eileen still denied this, reasoning they simply mistook what they saw or misunderstood. And to this, Cecile said it was time to present physical evidence. Nelt got nervous with the crowd watching, but Silica cheered him on, telling him to speak to everyone the same way he was always teaching things to her. He showed 2 different extractions made from moss and medicinal herbs. The blue one was colorless, transparent, and had no smell. But when mixed with the green, it turned deep blue. Silica had to stop him from explaining the fine, unimportant details, so she could explain that they sprayed the colorless solution in Bertia's room and cleaned it quickly after the perpetrator had stepped on it. Joanna and Anne got behind Eileen. They both wanted hers and Hironia's shoes. Nelt poured the green solution over Hironia's, and nothing happened. But on Eileen's, it changed. Eileen was about to begin her Danganronpa level crash out, saying this was all a lie and the whole student council was conspiring to protect Hironia. Cecile asked what the point of that was. He stared at her up close, menacingly, asking why that would make any sense at all. Corgain then snatched what she was holding. Today was the day the dormitories were getting a thorough cleaning, so Eileen was keeping the evidence with her. She screeched, telling him to give it back. Cecile knew they had her for sure now, as Corgain revealed the Hironia wig. She tried to tell Fanil it wasn't what he thought it was, but he only told her, "I despise you from the bottom of my heart." She was left sulking as he walked away. Now that business was taken care of, he was planning to take Tia away for some rest. Hironia grabbed his arm, explaining she was the victim here, questioning why he wasn't comforting her. He shrugged her off because that wasn't his problem. Hironia was losing it, blaming Bertia for dragging in rival ladies and mediating between them and the capture targets. She told Bertia to behave like a proper villainess and play the part of being hated. Hironia didn't care about the other capture targets, but she reminded Bertia that if Cecile wasn't with her, he'd never find happiness. She told Bertia she could not replace her, all because she was the Maiden of Destiny. Cecile could clearly see Bertia's scared expression. Hearing Maiden of Destiny, he wondered if there was some reason he and the heroine must end up together. Hironia clamored on about how this world existed so that she alone could shine, and that Bertia's prince would be hers someday. Bertia apologized before suddenly falling over, and everyone rushed to her. Sitting by her bedside in the infirmary, Cecile thought about how he should have been more attentive. The maid told him Bertia's been anxious lately, unable to sleep since being pushed down the stairs. She was too precious for him to lose. One of the few things in existence that could entertain him. He didn't want to let her exhaust herself like this. She woke up to his hand on her head. Him telling her everything was all right made her happy. This was like a nice dream. With him saying he wanted to let everyone in now, she quickly recomposed herself, saying they could come in. They all appeared behind the curtain, concerned for her, and she was confused. Cecile explained everyone was here on her side. They didn't want her to fret all alone. She quickly wiped her tears and told them she was going to work her hardest. First, to understand why they were all trying to cheer her up. Cecile thought this was what should be around Tia. It was because of this atmosphere that he just couldn't stop observing her. 2 months later, Bertia and Prince Sean announced the opening of Halm Academy's Middle School Division Culture Fair. Cecile was here to, of course, watch Bertia enjoy the fair. Joanna accompanied him, detailing her report on Yelin. The stairs incident was being treated as attempted murder, and she was locked up in a prison cell while her further crimes were being investigated. Joanna admitted after first meeting Bertia, she felt uneasy. She was worried Cecile would show disinterest in her, but after their interaction at the tea party, she felt much more at ease. She found Cecile's current self compared to his past self far more charming. Cecile noticed the polling station. Joanna explained tomorrow to close out the fair, they'd be deciding on the best couple. It was for the middle schoolers only, where Cecile was waiting for Bertia under the gazebo. He told her she's been so busy that he was quite lonely. He kissed her hand, making her blush, and everyone was gushing over his sweetness. Kuro didn't seem so happy, however. He flipped her flusteredness with some sweets he bought, and she got to munchin' right away. He wiped the cream on the corner of her mouth, telling her he was looking forward to tomorrow. During the closing ceremony, Bertia announced best couple. Third place was two couples, Vald and Cynthia, Nelt and Celica. Second place was Joanna and Prince Sean. And finally, the Grand Prix winners were Cecile and Bertia. But somehow, even though she read it loud and proud for everyone, she wasn't expecting that. With Bertia at reduced quality, Celica took the paper from her to read. When Prince Cecile wiped cream from Lady Bertia's mouth with his finger, the sweet atmosphere between them was such a delectable treat. That was just one of the opinions shared. Cecile told her since she was kind enough to introduce him, he's made an appearance. Bertia was too dizzy to keep up with all his smooth talk. Cecile then said with them being celebrated as best couple, they'd promised to build a wonderful relationship. He picked her up and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Everyone cheered over his charming display of affection. He thought Bertia being bright red was both entertaining and adorable. The two sat privately watching the fireworks. Bertia thought he was so mean because next year at the graduation party, he and the heroine would have their happy ending. Bertia wanted to make some nice memories with him before that, but now that painful event would only make her think of him. Cecile apologized. He was just so happy that they were picked as best couple. He asked if she felt differently. But no, Bertia was happy too. He thought about how he made an appeal to those around him with those intimate gestures. He hoped it might make the uneasiness Bertia's been displaying as of late disappear. He promised to her, in his mind, not to let their memories turn into something painful. Cecile became a third year, and Tia entered high school. However, she began avoiding him, outright running away from him constantly. She didn't have the skills to quietly sidestep him, so this was all she could do. Cecile assumed it had something to do with what Haronia had said to them before. He was sure Tia would tell him if he asked, so he's been intentionally abstaining from touching upon it. But now, he had no choice but to catch her. The lunch bell rang. Outside in the courtyard, Cecile called Tia's name, and while she bolted off, he smiled, asking, "Why ever are you running from me?" This happened over and over. His goal was to lure her and pin her to a wall. She asked if there was an option to let her go, but he saw it as the nature of male animals to chase fleeing prey. She told him she wasn't his prey. He told her she looked delicious. But even if she had a little meat on her bones, she asked that he please not eat her. Hearing the word meat, he had to look down. Zeno was appalled, but Cecile assured he wasn't looking there. He went on about when carnivores in the wild chase after their prey, sometimes their goal is just to play. He thought her objecting to being treated as a plaything felt a bit late at this point. Then hit her with a smooth line. "You're as lovely as a doll, so I can't help wanting to play with you." Based on her reaction, he could say she did have some attachment to him at least. He thought about asking the cause of her acting like this, but that would only cause more problems. She told him she needed to keep her distance from him now. There's roughly a year left until she struck aghast and must say farewell. The compelling forces have already begun their work. He asked if compelling forces meant powers that try to return everything to the original scenario. Bertia confirmed, since it was him, she'd tell the truth. The truth of the matter is, she's grown fatter. Cecile didn't get it, so she really had to emphasize she's gotten fatter since the end of the culture fair and has been steadily gaining weight. This had to be the compelling forces, because the Bertia in the original work is chubby. A character trait she thought she'd changed was starting to change back. She was so serious about this, Cecile felt he shouldn't laugh even though he wanted to. He told her the cause of her weight gain was likely in her dress pocket. She pulled out a sweet sack with 5 cookies, 3 cupcakes, and 5 marzipan. 300 calories. How is that only 300? Cecile heard that after the culture fair, she's been receiving a lot of sweets as gifts. She realized it was even from people she wasn't particularly friendly with. She thought this was an omen, but Cecile didn't think so. At the culture fair, it became common knowledge that she was a wonderful person. That's why the number of people who want to be closer to her by giving her sweets increased. Not the compelling forces. She merely needed to reduce the volume she ate. He suggested she share with the attendants, reminding her of her aim to become a first-rate villainess. And to become the best, she needed to stay by his side. She couldn't understand why. He was about to plunge into his lovey-dovey period with the heroine, so she was supposed to try to prevent that and race down the path to becoming a villainess. He told her that was the very reason. In order for her to become a magnificent villainess, she needed to become desperate to keep him all to herself. Only then would she at last become someone who stood squarely in the heroine's way. Tears welled in her eyes. She knew if she did become closer to him, in the end, he'd treat her coldly when she had to leave. He promised to find a way to strike her speechless without being cold, and that cheered her up. She'd in turn work her hardest not to run from this feeling a little while longer. Having no idea, he had no intention of letting her go. She was the only one who brought so much color to his life. In the student council room, he mentioned to Corgain that Heronia has been a frequent visitor of hers. Corgain found her irritating. Lately, she's been asking about Lady Bertia and her family. Cecile assumed Heronia was trying to get dirt on the Noches family's wrongdoings. Corgain was surprised he knew. Heronia's asked him numerous times. This was exactly what Cecile thought. The fall of House Noches and the Struck Speechless event are inseparable. Charles wanted in on this wicked plot if there was one, since Heronia caused him unpleasantness. Heronia had mentioned Charles womanizing about other women to Anne. This was untrue though. He was only earnestly devoted to her. When Heronia badmouthed Silica, it pissed Nelt off. Val didn't like her either. She's gotten in the way of his dates with Cynthia many times. Same for Sean. She was always saying hurtful things about Joanna. They all wanted to come together to crush her. Cecile told Corgain the next time Heronia came to him not to affirm or deny her suspicions of the Noches family. Since the Struck Speeches event would be at the graduation ceremony, he knew that's when Heronia would most likely make her move. One evening, Cecile took a trip to the palace to ascertain the reason Bertia kept trying to pair him with the heroine. He concluded that all this had to do with the fact he was from the royal family. His father, the king, was somewhat surprised. It was rare for Cecile to ask him to make time for him. Cecile cut to the chase. He wanted to hear about the Maiden of Destiny, claiming it was a phrase that appeared when he was researching a topic for personal reasons. Nothing came to his father's mind. There were legends of saints and battle maidens involved with the royal family, but nothing specific to this. Cecile assumed it was a nonsensical prophecy then. He didn't need a Maiden of Destiny when he had Bertia. The king's eyes widened hearing this. He asked if Cecile's life was fun now. Hearing it was all because of Bertia, the king felt glad he picked her. Cecile couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling he got from this. Before taking his leave, his father stopped him to let him know, even though he was incredibly bright, he was sure he still had his own worries, and that if ever troubled, to come and speak with him any time. This surprised Cecile. His father's words made him feel definite relief. He hadn't realized, but he was feeling anxiety that he never experienced before. There were only 3 months until Cecile's graduation. He asked what color Bertia wanted her dress to be for graduation. He wanted to give a dress to her as a present, since betrothed usually attended graduations together. She tried to say he should get one for Heronia, and this irritated him. Lately, his mood was unstable, and every action she took left him shaken without realizing it. He took her hand and told her they should go outside. He asked her about the dress color once more, because he wanted to design it to match his outfit. She started with a calm yellow, but quickly shifted to blue. But then, something more befitting of a villainess, like red or black. Cecile clenched his fist, asking if she's grown tired of yellow already. He could tell he was being stupid. She told him she loved yellow, and the soft blue, like a clear night sky. But that's exactly why she didn't want to wear them. Those colors had so many memories locked inside them, and she didn't want to paint over that with sadness. Since that was the case, he asked her to stop this Struck Speechless incident. She couldn't though. She wanted him and everyone else to be happy. He asked why this was necessary, because together, the two of them might be able to find a better way. But she loved everyone so much. That's why the only ones that should get hurt were her and her father, who committed crimes. But they didn't commit any. Bertia presented a diary of all the villainous deeds she's committed in the last few years to use as evidence just in case. Cecile opened it to read, May 4th, clear skies. Today at our tea lesson, I bullied Lady Heronia. I said so many mean things. Lady Heronia turned bright red and got angry and teary-eyed. It felt so refreshing. Cecile heard about this from Silica, who attended the same lesson. She told him even the teacher was exasperated with Heronia's atrocious manners. Bertia volunteered when no one else wanted to form a pair with her, and taught her everything politely and thoroughly. And yet, at the end, Heronia said, I know it's because you hate me. and started criticizing Bertia. Everyone looked at Heronia with such disdain. No matter how much Cecile read, most of her villainous deeds were like this. Normally, this would entertain him, but she gave it to him as a secret weapon to turn the tables on her. It made him shake. He asked why she hated being by his side so much. He tried telling himself not to say any more about how he felt, but he couldn't stop, adding that she said being with the heroine would bring him happiness, but he questioned the truth of that. He just couldn't see how that could be. He knew these words would hurt her, but kept going. The nail in the coffin would be him accusing her of just wanting to get away from him. Tears filled her eyes, and she shouts, "That isn't true at all!" He asked why run away from him then. She told him she wasn't. It's just, he was so dear to her. He then asked what she thought his happiness was, and she sternly answered for him and the heroine to be together. In his mind, he thought, "I hate you. For the first time since I was born, I find you to be infinitely detestable." She knew the destiny that befell him in the future, and there was nothing they could do to change it. He told her he'd destroyed that destiny for her. She tried to object, because he'd regret it. The fact she wouldn't tell him why was how she always shattered his wish for her to rely on him. It was vexing. In his head, he thought quite logically, but these variables called emotions got in the way. He decided to end the discussion. She started this game the day when they first met, where she proclaimed herself a villainess. Whatever conclusion this came to, he knew she'd see it through to the end. Bertia begged him to please find happiness. He said he would, so she shouldn't run away. The day of the graduation party, he told her she looked incredibly beautiful in the dress he bought her. The afternoon ceremony concluded. Now they were all waiting. According to her attendants, after much deliberation, she decided to wear this dress for him. She began to speak, but he silenced her. They were about to enter the hall. He'd be on stage, but wanted her to wait for him. He didn't want to hear her say things that had put distance between them. Tonight, he was going to destroy every future that'd make her sad. He didn't want her to rattle his emotions more than she already has. Taking his hand, she asked what she meant to him. He saw her tearful face and told her he thought she was adorable. But before he could say more, they were called to the hall. She stopped Cecile to thank him for everything. With that, he was determined to not let it end from here and make sure they'd continue walking side by side. His fiancée, the self-proclaimed villainess, said her role at the graduation party is to have the tables turned on her and be struck speechless. That's what he's heard about her previous life. There's an otome game that was set in this world. Conforming to the game scenario and pairing him off with this heroine is what she thinks will bring him happiness. Sidestepping her plots, he tried to win her over, even as she tried to distance herself from him. It made for quite a hectic school life. And now, at the graduation party, he'd supposedly expose all her past wrongdoings, strike her speechless, and bind himself to the heroine forever. King Alfasta gives his word first, congratulating everyone on their graduation. The typical high hopes speech and applause. Cecile then steps forward and gives the kind of speech one expects of the kingdom's crown prince. A promise to work diligently to ensure he'd be able to guide this country. Long live Home Academy, long live Alfasta Kingdom, all while Bertia looked at him with faint sadness. The royal couple chat about Cecile's impressiveness, though his mother thought it'd be better if he was a more straightforward child. His graduation day gave her a lot of anxiety. The king was also surprised by Cecile's plotting, but he was sure everything would work out in the end. Marquis Noches chimed in as well. Despite how his beloved daughter appears, he knew she had a very sensitive side, but they were all in on the plan. The king knew about the baron's daughter, the pink blonde-headed girl in question. Heronia complains about no one escorting her. It's so bad, she's had to resort to manipulating background characters. Next up, the passing of the student council presidency from Cecile to Corgain. Cecile declares in front of everyone he's appointing Corgain, who humbly accepts. The two hug it out to applause, but the crowd has no idea everything's been laid out perfectly according to Cecile's plans. And with that, Cecile announces one more declaration in front of everyone. Bertia becomes deathly scared, pale in the face, clenching her dress. Heronia's excited for what's to come, but Cecile wonders whatever could she have misunderstood to make her eyes sparkle like this. He calls for Bertia to step forward. She braces herself, but trips on her dress, luckily catching herself. Cecile holds back his laughter. He could tell she was so focused on calming her emotions, she lost balance. Eyes tearful, she readied herself to take all the pain at once. This was unusual for Cecile. He felt nervous. Something of a critical juncture he understands happens in life. He tries to bring up her having committed a grave crime, but she cuts in and talks over him. He wished she wouldn't do that. She starts to dramatically go on about how she didn't do anything wrong, but he taps her lips, assuring her she did commit a terribly grave crime. The crime of being born 2 years after him. Hearing him say this, she's caught off guard. Because of that, he'll have to wait a whole 2 years for her to graduate and live separated from him. The girls gush as he gets on one knee, telling Bertia to atone for this crime, he wants her to become his wife, presenting her a ring as a symbol of that promise. Oh wow, Bertia gasps. She asks aloud what this is. He slips the ring on her ring finger, telling her, don't be shy, and her head blew a gasket. This is the way he's decided to strike her speechless. He tells everyone that in 2 years, they'd be married and would strive to make the kingdom even better. Everyone congratulates with cheer, except this stupid Heronia, raising her hand saying, I object. Cecile thought this foolish girl might. Heronia points the finger at Bertia, telling Cecile she was deceiving him, accusing her of discriminating against people based on social rank, and horribly bullying many people, including Heronia. Heronia claims just yesterday, Bertia tried to push her down the stairs. Everyone gasps, but Cecile responds to, yesterday. As a woman betrothed to the crown prince, Bertia has so many eyes on her during the day, she can't move in secret. Yesterday, Bertia was with him in the evening and after dinner. She seemed unwell, and he escorted her to her room in the dormitories, as well as had the house mother check on her from time to time. The report he received was Bertia just resting the whole time. To this, Heronia claims Bertia must have asked someone to push her down the stairs. But if the perpetrator is someone else, this still affects Bertia's honor. So he'd investigate it thoroughly. He asks who did it, but Heronia says she doesn't know. Hearing she has no clue, he challenges the idea of bringing up his fiancée into this at all. Heronia then moves to the fact there are other victims of bullying as well. She calls for people to step forward, and the two closest, Cynthia and Silica, just stare at her coldly. No one is backing Heronia up, though she claims everyone's always telling her about it. Cecile suspected this as the likely outcome. If they verbally accuse the crown prince's fiancé in a place like this, it will affect their own social standing. There are a few ladies who easily averted their gazes, but they likely thought of it as idle chatting and voiced discontent. Cecile smiled, telling Miss Heronia politely to withdraw her objection. She refuses and pulls out a confidential report from under her skirt. Everyone is appalled over this improperness. Cecile didn't want to touch this nasty envelope, wherever she kept it. So, Zeno hands over the contents from inside. Bertia becomes horrified, with Cecile taking a single glance. As he expected, it was a report on an investigation into Marquis Noches. He already knew Heronia hired people to look into him. Bertia was shaking. Cecile knew she wanted this for so long, but losing something so important to her, though she was resolved to it, must still be frightening. He felt bad, because he was a little happy, all because her hand seemed to be pleading with him, confirming him that this wasn't the future she wanted. Heronia boldly tells Cecile the Marquis has committed crimes. The future queen being the daughter of a criminal is unforgivable. Cecile acknowledges those were good documents, but the crimes were not of the Marquis. Instead, Viscount ComfyTea, Count Conmorno, and Baron Sigil. There's only solid proof that those three committed crimes, and now they were being apprehended live. Heronia was eager, because in the Noches files, she gave him proof of their connection to Marquis Noches. But Cecile thought just because he was in them didn't mean he did anything wrong. Heronia next pointed to Corgain, certain he'd know something, but he said he didn't. She tells him that can't be. He's always telling her all sorts of things, and he responds he did remember paying little attention as she spoke of her unfounded suspicions. He never affirmed them. Corgain's permitted to assist the Marquis in his work simply because their relationship was favorable. Heronia pleaded, claiming the Marquis made him suffer for so many years. This confirms to Cecile she's the same as Tia, believing their future aligns with the scenario of the otome game, which is why, when given vague answers from which no conclusions could be drawn, she decided that it was affirmation. Cecile then says he and his father already knew all the contents from her report because they advanced their own undercover investigation, conducted by the Marquis himself. Marquis Noches was playing an undercover cop. Heronia's expression went from angry to distraught. She lost, but Cecile ponders on what to do now, since she spoke such disparaging and violent words against his fiancée and her father. The guards began to escort her out, and she monologues. "This isn't right. Why don't you understand? I'm the heroine. Yet, why won't you choose me? I'm your maiden of destiny. That woman won't be able to take my place. After all, she's just the villainess. I'm the only one that can turn you into a human, you heartless crown prince." Bertia felt the weight of her words as well. "I've acted as you wanted me to all this time, haven't I? After the entrance ceremony, Pichon and I appeared right in front of you, and I'm certain we completed all the other events too. So why won't you choose me? And even today, I came here wearing a yellow dress. I chose for your sake. Being treated like this, in spite of all that, is just too much." Cecile thought it was so strange. He never once said or thought he wanted her to choose him. Heronia lashes out, asking what's his problem. He's just the android prince, saying if she doesn't pick him, he's nothing more than a clever doll. She's his maiden of destiny, and if they kiss, a mark will appear on his body as proof. If he didn't have her, then from now on, he'd always be as he's been. He'd spend tedious days in a world without color, and then, when he can't stand the boredom, he'll destroy himself. Cecile didn't understand the meaning of her words, but questioned what this feeling was, the feeling of having something precious torn without restraint. The coldness suddenly washed away as Bertia grabbed his face, begging Cecile not to listen to what Heronia was saying. He felt like such an idiot. As he kissed her hand, only his fiancée was truly the most adorable. He demanded the guards take Heronia away immediately. The heroine told them to stop, and that's when Pichon dove in and smashed the ceiling, crackling the glass to fall onto them. Kuro and Zeno went on defense, protecting them from the glass. That's when Pichon brave birds in, but Kuro defends with her shadow barrier. Pichon smiles at Heronia and winds back to dive again. The bird disappears and catches Kuro off guard, giving an opening to strike directly, severing Cecile's earring link. And so he falls right before Bertia. Awaking in a vast space, he figures a light spirit put him in some sort of mindscape. This likely wasn't his physical body. Light shines above, and he wakes up in the past to his father asking if meeting his fiancée for the first time made him nervous. Cecile remembered this was the day he'd meet Bertia. Bertia entered with her father, shaking and nervous as she presented herself as the eldest daughter of House Noches. Escorting her, Cecile thought her actions were different than before. But that's strange. This is the first time he's met her. He thought, unlike Joanna, Bertia was entirely an ordinary young lady. He asked her to enjoy the cake, but she doesn't, saying their time together makes her heart so full. By the end of it, Zeno asks Cecile what he thinks, and he says his father will make the decision. If there are no problems with her becoming future queen, that's enough. Whatever young lady might appear, he was sure it'd make no difference. Cecile gasped as we moved back to the space. That didn't match his first time meeting Tia at all. To be precise, she was the only thing entirely different. The real Tia is an eccentric girl who claims to be a villainess. Undeniably though, he knew that boy was him. Removing his glove, his eyes widened with shock. His hand was that of a doll. Bertia screams for Cecile to wake up, and everyone comes rushing his way. Even Heronia was horrified. In his mind, he stares at his limp, wooden hand as his memory of Heronia calling him nothing more than a clever doll screams at him. What she said was true. Back then, he was a living doll with no emotions. But that's precisely why there was exactly one thing he wished for. Someone he would cherish. That flashback he experienced earlier was not his Tia. Just a scene shown to him like a dream by the light spirit. He knew that. And yet, that vivid sensation of being emotionless like he was then felt so real. As he spent time with Tia, he gathered warmth known as emotions to him and felt as if it was being stolen from him. He hated this. He didn't want to go back to those days. Who could have imagined so many would die from this epidemic? He spoke with Zeno about the Luana leaf's effectiveness against it, but it wasn't something they could grow at this point in time. He found Marquis Noches begging his father to share some of the Luana leaf from the royal storage to save his sickly wife. Cecile remembered Bertia telling him about her mother in a letter she sent. He was surprised Douglas would still approach the king, knowing he could be spreading the disease from back home. The king pleaded with Douglas to understand. So many of their people were suffering, and he could not give preferential treatment to his retainers. Douglas begged harder. His wife Myrtia seemed like she was on the brink of death. He wasn't asking as a vassal, but as a friend. The king just apologized. He could not give up the Luana leaf, but he told Douglas to hold strong. They'd do what they could. Cecile went to see his father in his office to tell him he did the right thing. If the king were to show favoritism toward a vassal, it would breed discontent among the people. Cain knew this, but at the same time, he felt he lost the right to be Douglas's friend. At Myrtia's funeral, Cecile still questioned what could be more important than being correct as a king. Douglas stared at his wife's grave like an empty shell of himself. Cecile expressed his sympathies to Bertia and told her he was ready to be of use to her at any time before walking away. Douglas muttered about how he's devoted everything to the royal family, but this was the result. He told Bertia to become queen no matter what. That way, no matter what might happen, she'd be protected above all else, and he'd do whatever it took to ensure that. Cecile collapses. His legs turned into dolls as well. He could see that was the future they supposedly changed. That was a version of himself who couldn't understand his father's anguish. Bertia lost her mother, so he put on a sad face and offered indifferent words. Those scenes were also no more than images shown to him by the light spirit. But just as you don't realize you're in a dream when you're dreaming, his current self overlaps with his self from the future that could have been. He hated this. This wasn't who he was. His warmth, the emotions he finally obtained. He didn't want Bertia to be taken away from him. Bertia's maid complimented her for looking sweet and lovely, but she didn't like it and asked if the maid was trying to sabotage her debut in society. She threw down and crushed her hairpin, then ran to her father and said the maid was trying to embarrass her. Douglas doted over his daughter and told the maid she was finished as of today. She ran out crying and apologized to Cecile along the way. Bertie assured him the maid was careless, so they fired her. That was all. Since his wife died, the Marquis became a different person. Bertia was the only one he showed any affection to. Cecile heard she grew more arrogant by the day. Bertia was anxious about their upcoming debut, but looked forward to Cecile escorting her. He told her not to worry and leave everything to him. For the moment, she was submissive to Cecile, so he was fine. It would be difficult to break off the engagement anyway. Cecile commented on the fact it seemed a lot dimmer outside as of late. But with Zeno replying the weather seemed fair and clear today, Cecile's eyes widened as the light shone. As he lay on the floor fully doll form, Pichon weeps and sobs his apologies, but promised Cecile would be happy. In the student council office, Zeno presented the bouquet and told Cecile it was time to go. Cecile thought about how he'd likely be bored seeing Bertia, but if he skipped her tea party, it'd only create more problems later. That's when he was taken aback by a pink-haired girl chasing after an unusual bird. Seeing her giggling, he thought it was unusual she let the bird fly free instead of staying in a cage. He asked if she was a new student, and she grew frantic, asking him if he was talking to her. He asked if she was going to the tea party, but since coming from the countryside, she didn't know anyone here. That's why she and Pichon were exploring the school together. Cecile then presented her with a single rose from the bouquet and said this was a celebration for her, a congratulations on her enrollment. His smile towards her was breathtaking. Zeno told Cecile him showing interest in someone was quite unusual, but he simply found the bird and the frolicking young lady unusual. Perhaps that was a type of interest. Another day, Cecile decided to take a break from work, and Zeno suggested looking at the roses in the courtyard. Cecile's never given any thought to his preferences regarding flowers. The gardeners try to make beautiful flowers bloom and look after everything, so it's only natural they create magnificent gardens. But still, it was no more than the expected result. He wondered why everyone was so grateful when observing the flowers. Finding Heronia sleeping against a tree, he smiled and gently told her she shouldn't sleep here. She woke up gently at first and backed away fast upon seeing him. He calmly told her a lady shouldn't show her defenseless sleeping face, and she was somewhat embarrassed. It was warm and felt so nice, she couldn't help nodding off, but apologized for her disgraceful display. He didn't think it was bad at all, because thanks to her, he was able to see something unusual. A young lady scrambling backwards at full strength. The two exchanged pleasantries, and she was surprised to learn he was the crown prince of the kingdom. all in low-quality budget. Now she definitely had to apologize for her disrespectful behavior. At his entrance ceremony speech, she was sitting all the way at the back, so while she heard his voice, she wasn't able to see his face. He was fine, but as an apology, he asked her to go around the garden one more time with him. While he came to see the roses, he thought it'd be more fun if it was the two of them. Hironia gleefully accepted, and the two walked off, not knowing Bertia was watching. All the events transpired like they were supposed to. Someone locked the two of them in a room together. He thought fondly about the country lady with the bird for a friend, who slept where anyone could see her. A fun plaything. She tripped and fell, with Bertia tauntingly apologizing, asking if her foot got caught on something. Cecile witnessed it from a window, thinking up until now, the Marquis's house has been useful, so he let her be. But if Bertia planned on breaking his new toy, he'd have to get rid of her. Corgain was someone who knew all about Marquis Noches' dealings in the dark. Corgain denied it, and Cecile told him he wanted to save him. He knew Corgain was probably being threatened into helping against his will, that he's been suffering this whole time. Cecile met under the moonlight with Hironia the night before his graduation. He thought she's become a splendid young noblewoman now, and she got so embarrassed with him bringing up her chasing her bird during their first interaction. He wanted to give her this dress, one she should wear while standing beside him at graduation. She knew he had Bertia, but she couldn't change how she felt. Even knowing it had put her at odds with Lady Bertia, she said, "Prince Cecile, I love you. I love you so much." Cecile was taken aback. He suddenly pulled her in for embrace, thinking about how up until now, he felt an interest, a slight affection for her. But this sensation gave him a feverishly hot feeling in his chest. Was this what was commonly referred to as love? Whatever emotion this might be, she was the toy that finally captured his interest. He hoped she wouldn't disappoint. The people clapped as Cecile transferred all his rights to Corgain as next year's student council president. He then announced there was a young lady here who would like to make a confession, and called Hironia Inderon to step forward. Everyone was amutter with gossip, Bertia scowling every second. Hironia told everyone that Bertia pushed her down the stairs last night. Everyone gasped. In addition, Hironia's been locked in storage rooms, and Bertia used others to attack her indirectly. Bertia smugly replied she had no recollection of anything that happened. However, Cecile said he only half believed Hironia at first, but he had all the evidence right here in the envelopes. Hironia wasn't the only victim. Some have been discriminated against because of their rank, or became victims of vicious bullying. She told the people in the crowd to have courage, and so many of the ladies raised their hands, admitting their victimhood. Cecile asked Bertie if she had some kind of rebuttal. She sighed and went, "And even if all the proof was genuine, she was the daughter of a marquis and the future queen. Those lower-ranked nobles who garnered her displeasure committed the far greater crime in her eyes." Cecile scoffed, simply replying he'd rid her of that. In front of everyone, he indicted Marquis Noches and had him apprehended. He had evidence of the injustices committed by Count Vladimir and the others. His father was aware too. Bertia shrieked as her father was taken away. But since he was a criminal, Cecile couldn't entrust the role of mother of the kingdom to her, and thus dissolved his betrothal. She thought this had to be a mistake, and claimed her father's innocence. She swore she'd become queen no matter what it takes. But he only stared at her with disdain. As tears dripped down her face, and she screamed his name, he saw an image of the Tia he always knew, and a gaping hole ripped open above them. All the memories of her came flooding in, and with Hironia placing her hand on his shoulder, he slaps it away. He runs down and embraces Bertia. Everyone hears Pichan's illusion. He knew this wasn't his Tia. Everything shatters, and he rises from that nightmare. But the warmth in his chest he felt was being stolen, he got it all back. This is the world where his Bertia belongs. He was so happy, he was crying. So happy, Tia gave him so many unusual experiences. He told Pichan to give up. No matter what illusions he showed him, his heart wouldn't change. The little bird boy sobs, asking why it can't be Hironia. He begs Cecile to choose her, but he couldn't. Because of the things the two of them have done, he's come to hate her. But Hironia told Pichan that Cecile was her destiny, so it was natural for him to love her. She was just trying to guide him to the correct future. Cecile questions who would love someone who hurts others for the sake of granting their own wish. Pichan argued that if they didn't, Hironia wouldn't be able to find happiness. But Cecile reasoned Because they did all that, she wasn't able to find happiness. If she had accepted the changed future and worked hard to make people wholeheartedly like her, then she likely wouldn't have stood at graduation all alone. Even if things didn't turn out how she wanted, she still would have been happy. But she never reflected on her actions, and Pichon only made her more arrogant. Pichon continued to sob and asked for just one thing, for Cecile to tell her that even if she couldn't see him anymore, he'd always be with her. Cecile was suddenly flashed with memories of Pichon's first meeting with Heronia. Then, Pichon disappeared. It made Cecile's heart hurt a little. He called for Zeno's strength, and finally woke up to Joanna, Silica, and Douglas frantically looking over him. He needed to get up, or else something would happen to Bertia. He got up quickly, asking what was going to happen to Bertia. Joanna told him his fiancée was going to shave her head and enter a nunnery, and there he saw her, struggling against the guys to let her go and give her scissors immediately, sobbing and shrieking that even the sword hanging around their waist would do. Cecile asked, why a nun? And apparently, when Bertia saw he wasn't waking, she went into full panic and went mad, believing if she didn't have the tables turned on her, fate would never allow Cecile to wake up. She pleaded for the gods, Buddhas, and even the heroine to please save Cecile and the kingdom. She didn't even notice him telling her to calm down until he touched her arm. He said, "Good morning, my adorable Tia," and she threw the guys off to give him a hug. Cecile apologized for worrying her greatly, but he was fine now. She still kept swearing to serve the Buddha or enter a convent and serve God. But of course, Cecile would not allow his crown princess to enter a convent. Also, the future where he and the heroine are a couple will never arrive. He realized for himself that there was no one else for him except Bertia. Not prepared at all for her to ask, What about the plot events after this one? He dismissed everyone, so he and Bertia could be alone. But first, he wanted to know how the scene played out at the graduation party, right before he collapsed. The way everyone else saw it. Joanna answered that a bird crashed through the glass, and in order to protect her, Lady Bertia's attendant leaped out in front of her. Then, just before the bird ran into her, it seemed to vanish in a flash of light. Charles couldn't believe it, and Cecile confirmed the bird was a light spirit in disguise. These two possessed knowledge of spirits, yet still reacted with shock. It would be bad for others to learn of this, so he left it to them to cover up. Now with everyone else gone, Cecile gently told Tia to tell him everything. No matter how much she fought it, this situation would not change. But she could change the future. Future really irked her. With tearful eyes, she pleaded with him not to lie to her. If he didn't end up with the heroine, he wouldn't have the slightest interest in the kingdom, any of them, or the future. Trying to talk her through her sobs, he didn't know what she was thinking, or what was making her grieve this way. But he assured her he wasn't lying. He wants to make this kingdom even better than it is now, largely for the sake of the future where he will live with her. He asked her to believe him, and she sniffled and nodded, finally conceding to tell him. Afterwards, he re-summarized the graduation party was a judgment event, as well as the moment when the heroine picks her romantic interest. From there on, she enters an individualized route with its own set of story events. If the heroine's affection rating before the graduation party is high, the capture target sends an item the color of their hair or eyes. The list includes Cecile's dress, Sean's tiara, Vald's ring, Nelt's earrings, Charles' gloves, and Corgain's necklace. Their status changes to capturable, and the heroine is able to choose them. By wearing the selected item, the heroine's route changes. Today, she wore the yellow dress that was supposed to be sent by Cecile. She wanted to choose his route, but of course, he never sent it. And the fact she was trying to choose him, he thought she was a fool for it. Meanwhile, the dress he gave Bertia is lavishly adorned by the color of his hair. Surely, she's noticed. Bertia adds in the Prince Cecile route, everyone gets a happy ending, except for the villainess. But in all other routes, it never looks good for Cecile. She made it clear what she was about to describe was a Cecile from the Otome game and his future. In the Vald route, he comes running into Cecile's office and tells him a neighboring country is attacking. The king and the others were already gathering in the office. However, Cecile just smiled at him. The war with the neighboring country began, and how fast the kingdom was forced into a bitter struggle. But then, Cecile joined the battle, and their forces made a comeback. He knew his presence there would raise morale around him. Vald would be there the whole time protecting Cecile, and it wears on his body and mind. That's when the heroine goes and supports him. He'd say, "I'm sorry to call you out so late, but I wanted to see your face." There was no trouble for her though. She'd be glad his first campaign was victorious. Despite him coming out unscathed, he felt horrified just thinking about all those who died around him, the people he couldn't save. Heronia would tell him not to blame himself though. He fought as a knight, and she was proud of him, and he felt comfort in this. Under Cecile's command, Alfasta safely defeats the neighboring kingdom. However, the war does not end there. Using self-defense and the strengthening of the kingdom as a pretext, Alfasta goes on a conquest and invades another country. Then one day, Cecile slays the enemy commander in a cold duel, asking if there were any others who wanted to challenge him. The enemy was so intimidated, they retreated without escalating to any more soldiers fighting. But Vald begged him to please stop charging across enemy lines. Cecile thought he was right. If he fell, then their forces would be at a disadvantage. But still, he smiled. Vald questioned how he could still be smiling. How could he see these mountains of bodies and feel nothing? Their diversionary unit was completely wiped out. But he just couldn't see that's why Cecile's plan worked. And Cecile reminded him they agreed to it. With the sacrifice of a mere 100, 1,000 were saved. And he intended to be quite kind to their families. He didn't understand why Vald was so angry. However, he had to give some thought about how to replenish their lost numbers. Vald felt something was wrong here. Cecile treated people like pawns, as if playing on a chessboard. Cecile gave a devilish smirk, telling Vald they were to move on. The next battle awaited. And from that moment, Vald doubts his master and hides it in his heart. He suffers greatly on Alfasta's path to conquest, but the heroine and the citizens he saved support him, and he makes up his mind to fulfill his duty. In the end, Alfasta consolidates all its neighboring countries, and Vald and the heroine live a peaceful life together. Unlike who he was now, Cecile thought that version of himself was unable to find an interest in anything, probably not even himself. The only thing that called to his heart was battle. That's why he treated everyone and everything like game pieces. Now he finally understood why Tia relentlessly tried to pair him with the heroine, and also why she refused to tell him the reason for it. She worried that he'd be disappointed in himself and hurt by her words. Being always drawn to her ridiculousness, he misjudged her. Bertia was hopelessly kind. Cecile was fine, but ready to hear more. So Bertia went on about him being a shut-in, or going missing, getting assassinated, or running away. He asked for Sean's route, and she explained Cecile suddenly ran away. Sean read a letter from him that read, "I've grown bored with being royalty, so I give up all rights to the throne and leave everything to my little brother." It's all very simple, so it shouldn't pose a problem. After that, King Cain is assassinated with poison, and when Prince Sean is scared because a neighboring country is invading, the heroine supports him. Heronia tells him to take a stand, and he's victorious in his first campaign. If she hadn't been there for him, he wouldn't have been able to keep going. They have a happy ending, but you don't get the details of the war ending on that route. On Nelt's route, the research he'd been working on for years gets completed in an instant by Cecile. That's where the story starts. Prince Cecile becomes obsessed with minerals and black powder, and begins locking himself away in the lab. A neighboring country sees it as their chance to attack, and in response, Nelt creates a powerful weapon that works with the black powder perfected by Cecile. They decimate the battlefield, and Nelt ends up happy with the heroine. In Charles's route, Cecile disappears in a neighboring country after diplomatic negotiations. He tails someone suspicious alone, and just like that, he's gone. Charles and the heroine head to the country in the name of diplomacy, getting ambushed by the shout of, "What are you doing?" But that was just Cecile playing around. They learned Cecile infiltrated the enemy to work from the inside, while Charles worked from the outside to attack and destroy the other country. Once the kingdom becomes peaceful, Charles and Heronia become a couple and have a happy ending. Lastly is Corgain's route. It begins with someone assassinating Cecile. Corgain and the heroine embark on an undercover investigation. The ones who ordered the prince's assassination were, of course, a neighboring kingdom's royal family. In the end, they win the war and successfully avenge Cecile. Not exactly a happy ending, but Heronia and Corgain fall deeply in love after overcoming so much danger together. Cecile could see now that other than the route where he and the heroine end up together, there's always a war. It made sense why Tia was trying to force them to be together. The reason he got assassinated is likely because he'd grown bored with living. In Sean's route, either he wasn't interested in people, or he failed to understand his younger brother and forced a role on him that he was clearly unsuited for. In Nelt's route, he didn't consider his feelings. He simply thought Nelt's research looked interesting, so he stole it from him. In Charles's route, he acted alone, because he likely had no concept of relying on others. Just like the person he was before meeting Tia, he thought he was a far worse human than he imagined. Bertia told him that wasn't true. He's completely different from the Cecile in the game. He cares for others and has a kind heart. The Cecile she loves so much is not just a doll. Cecile held her close. Hearing her say that made him so happy. But it was possible he hadn't quite become completely human yet. But if the version of him she wanted was human, that's who he wanted to be. He wanted her to smile. She couldn't stop crying though, knowing he hadn't found his maiden of destiny. She was so scared about what was going to happen to the scenario now. Suddenly, Cecile remembered Heronia screaming to him about being his maiden of destiny, and that kissing her would make a mark appear on her body as proof. He realized that's what it was, and told Zeno to give Bertia the proof, even though he didn't want to. Cecile opens the door, and the two step outside. He asks Bertia if she loves him, and she gets so flustered. She tries to deny it, but he reminds her she said, "The Sir Cecile that I love so much." She thought she didn't have the right, because she's the villainess, but he told her it's alright, saying, "Because I love you too, Tia," taking her breath away. He goes on saying, "I'm completely hopeless, but if you capture me as your own, then I think I'll become a decent crown prince and capture target. That's why you're mine, maiden of destiny." He kisses her, and the mark appears on her hand. Kuro jolts and takes her master away. She's not happy about what Cecile just did at all, but he tells Bertia to look at her hand, and she's surprised to see the seal on it. She questions if she was the heroine all along. Cecile tells her the mark is proof he's chosen her. When their masters wish it, spirits can bestow a blessing on their soulmate. That's the mark of the Maiden of Destiny. Now that she has it, if she's in danger, he and Zeno will be able to tell, and the strength of the spirits will protect her. No matter where she is, he'd be able to find her, and he had no intention of ever letting her go. She can never run away from him again. He declares it now, saying, "So you'd best resign yourself." Bertia suddenly had an epiphany, as if she didn't understand what he just said at all. He thought she'd be more frightened by his obsession or something, but she just saw it as a way to avoid him from going missing or being assassinated. For the shut-in and berserker routes, she just needed to keep him entertained. She'll learn things like the comedic belly face and loach scooping dance. She told Kuro to give him a mark too. Even though she didn't want to, she slapped her tail on his hand, blessing him with the dark spirit mark. He told Bertia from now on, she needed to tell him when something troubled her. They were soulmates now. It suddenly hit her. As he continued to explain, you can only give these marks to one person in your life. He then whispered, "I can't wait for the wedding, my beloved wife," planting a kiss on her cheek, causing her to scream. The graduation party that had been interrupted safely recommenced. While Cecile and Tia were talking, the rest of the gang kept things moving along, so it's all thanks to them. However, problems still remained. He went to see Heronia, and she felt relieved. She believed in him, saying he'd never fall into the villainess's evil clutches. She knew he would realize she was right. He snapped coldly, telling her not to come near him. She stood flabbergasted, but he's merely come to deliver a message and chat for a bit. He had her sit down, and she thought she understood. He was here to learn about her sacred light. She began to ramble, but he cut her off, saying everything was caused by an out-of-control light spirit. Again, she was caught off guard. She knew it. She's the heroine, after all, a saint that all divine creatures acknowledge. But Cecile cut her off again, because he was getting sick of the misunderstandings. Spirits were indeed rare, but a large number of them exist with people who formed pacts with them. She was not special. Heronia thought there was no way. There wasn't any mention of spirits in the game, but he clarified that in order to prevent the government from using them, their existence is hidden from everyone, but the highest of nobility. It's only natural that a baron's daughter, the lowest nobility ranking, would know about them. If she spoke about this to anyone, her safety wasn't guaranteed. He thanked her for her cooperation. A few days later, Bertia burst into Cecile's room to ask what happened to Heronia. Cecile pleasantly welcomed her and said if she wished to know her fate, to come over here, on his lap. She began to blush as she asked if this would do. He's definitely slick with it. He told Heronia the light spirit showed him the correct future that existed in her memories. She gasped with joy, thinking he must know he should choose her, because that's the future that'd make him happiest. But if that's what she called his happiness, he didn't want it. She argued it's because he's still a doll, so he can't feel happiness anyway since they aren't together. To this, he told her he ceased being a doll before he came to see her. His maiden of destiny, Bertia, made him human. Heronia started crashing out again, asking what that was supposed to mean. Bertia's the wicked villainess. It's only because she went and changed the scenario that all these bad things started happening. Cecile said that was indeed true. The Bertia the Light Spirit showed him was most definitely a different person, but he also knew of one other individual who has changed completely. Heronia grew furious, questioning if there was someone else meddling with the game's scenario. He pointed at her. She became nervous, stammering as she said she advanced the plot events as the scenario dictated. She didn't understand how that made her a different person. Cecile replied the other Heronia was a country lady, unused to the way of noble society. By the time he was graduating, she had grown into a wonderfully refined lady. In comparison, the Heronia of now did not abide by the rules of society and never cultivated refinement. She was shaking as Cecile added that Professor was exasperated with her lack of manners at tea. He questioned what she's even learned in these last 4 years. To become the crown princess means that a woman's every move would be perceived as representing the kingdom. Her personal mistakes will become the kingdom's failings. He doubted she could fulfill such an important role. She screeched at him to shut up. She couldn't comprehend. There's no event like this in the game. I won't have it. I won't. I'll never accept a future like this. She asked where Pichon went. If he's with her, then everyone would understand that she's special. Cecile said her pet bird no longer exists in this world. Life extinguished when he tried to protect her recklessness. This is the result of everything she's done. In the future, the two of them chose. She called him a liar and called for Pichon over and over. She fell to the floor. She didn't want this. Even if no one else believed what she said, Pichon was the only one who was always by her side. This was the first time he'd seen this side of her. He realized there was truly a bond between her and her spirit. That was where the meeting ended though. But to finish things off, he needed to deliver a message for her. Even if you can't see me, I will always be with you. That's what Pichon asked him to tell her. As she wept, he gave her one act of sympathy, wrapping a necklace memento of the bird around her neck, a fragment of Pichon's soul. Just as his soul was about to crumble away, he borrowed Zeno's power to retain this piece. It's faint, but a trace of his will remains inside. Heronia was left to mourn alone. After that, as part of Heronia's punishment, it was decided she'd be sent to a convent. He actually requested his father allow him to pick which one. The guards brought her before them, and Cecile explained her punishment in detail. The Baron's house will cut all ties with her, and she'd be sent to a convent as a commoner. He'd give her one choice, and had her lift her head, which revealed her soul and face. A convent in the harsh environment of the northernmost point of the kingdom, or a convent in a temperate area, 3 days carriage ride south of the capital. Kane pointed out these choices were unbalanced. Due to the harsh conditions at the northern convent, while rare, some have died there. However, Cecile's heard they believe in the divine light, and that its power is strong there. If someone prays consistently, that which they have lost may regain its life. That's the kind of miracle they say might occur there. The light spirit gave his life for her. He wondered how far she would go for him. So, north or south? Which way would she go? She struggled to answer initially, but adamantly answered the north. Request granted. She was no longer the heroine, nothing special, just a young lady named Heronia. But in this moment, she did something that caught him off guard. She bowed gracefully before them. He smiled, abandoning her role as the heroine and living as a woman, alone for her friend's sake. He welcomed her decision. He was certain Tia wouldn't want her to be unhappy. Bertia knew the heroine would make the right choice and offer prayers for a wounded spirit. She was cheery because Cecile omitted the troublesome bits, but didn't tell her any lies. She saw it as a beautiful self-sacrifice, and that the heroine really was different from everyone. She'd grow flustered. As he mentioned, he had her captive, yet Heronia was all she was thinking about. Perhaps he needed to put in serious effort. Squeezing her waist tight, he told her he already sent everyone away. But of course, he couldn't send their spirits away at all. He was just playing around though. He'd save all sorts of pleasure for when they're married. Zeno felt too embarrassed seeing his master in a stacked position like a turtle with its offspring. Cecile told Zeno to get on the ground and be a horse for him. It wasn't good to leave people out. So if he was a horse, they'd all sit on top. Taking a stroll, Cecile told Bertia she wouldn't need to worry about the heroine anymore. He wanted her to be at ease and be his bride. Bertia shrieked over the idea, but Cecile was matter-of-fact. This was decided when they were little, so why should she be surprised now? Bertia only aimed to become a first-rate villainess, so she wasn't confident she could be queen. Cecile knew her well though. She'd be fine. She braced herself and shouted to the world she'd devote herself entirely to helping Cecile become a magnificent king. That's how she'd make sure he became incredibly, overwhelmingly happy. She promised to never leave his side, since she was an irregularity that caused the scenario to change. So she'd take full responsibility and begin anew. Cecile felt reassured. Even if the scenario changes, the most important conclusion never will. He lifted her glove to reveal the spirit blessing he gave her and kissed her hand. The most important thing to him is that his maiden of destiny is with him, and they'd continue to live delightful lives together. The engagement ring shined bright on her finger. That's why she didn't need to know about the blood he carried within him. It was the night of the announcement of Heronia's punishment. Kane congratulated Cecile on his graduation over drinks. Cecile felt a lot better after resolving the Heronia situation, and now he could focus on wedding preparations. His father asked him why he enjoyed being with Bertia, and if he thought he'd find happiness. Cecile answered, of course, no other woman could make him as happy as she did. If anything troubled him, it'd be the fact he might accidentally destroy a nation because she's so dear to him. His father could hardly believe what he was saying, and burst into a chuckle. However, these pleasantries weren't the reason Cecile came here to talk. He wanted to know the secret his father was keeping from him. Kane sighed, asking when he learned about this. But it was merely speculation Cecile gathered, and his father's reaction that just convinced him. It's just as Cecile suspected. In the royal family, people like Cecile are children born with exceptional abilities from time to time. In exchange for their advanced abilities, they show a lack of emotion and little interest in anything that one might say they show none at all. As such, they're in constant pursuit of something that can evoke their emotions, and when they find something, they cling to it desperately. It's said the influence comes from the blood of the kingdom's founder, King Yojin, the Hero King, a title that was given to him later, but in reality, he was just someone who loved battle, a bloodthirsty conqueror. His wife was the one who became heavily involved in shaping his Hero King title. King Tojin and Queen Ene. In order to maintain friendly relations between tribes, the two of them were brought together and betrothed. From a young age, Tojin was brilliant and showed little interest in anything. However, Ene would come to him with challenges, and he would often play with her. At first, she challenged him to a foot race, but he wasn't eager since no one could beat him anyway. So she bolted off and told him whoever touched the tree first wins. He sighed and went along with it since he didn't have a choice. The thing he found a profound interest in was a battle game. He became deeply absorbed in it, and just when playing on a board started to leave him feeling unsatisfied, a war broke out between tribes. Tojin had grown into a young man. He led troops to battle, and before long, he had brought many tribes under him. He sought even more battles, but one woman stood in his way, and they told him if he kept taking lives needlessly, she'd come to hate him. The words struck him with such a deep sense of unease that it said he ceased going to battle immediately. Cecile thought she must have been his maiden of destiny. Because of her, he devoted himself to building a peaceful kingdom and came to be called the Hero King. Cecile thought about how if Tia said that to him, he'd likely do as she told him. After that, once every few hundred years, someone like King Tojin, possessing exceptional abilities, is born into the royal family. Without exception, each has held the potential for evil in their hearts. A double-edged sword. They could be wise or foolish kings, or eliminated before that happens. Cecile realized the author of the books in the hidden library was one of those members of the royal family. As soon as Cecile was born, it was clear he understood words far sooner than other babies. Kane's mind went blank. Even though he knew the possibility existed, he never thought his own child would be one of them. He wasn't disappointed though. Who wouldn't want an intelligent heir? He was just worried because he wanted his child to feel all sorts of things and find happiness. That's why he took a gamble with Bertia. She had a scatterbrained side, but she's emotionally expressive, compassionate, and kind. In a way, Cecile's exact opposite. He thought together, it'd grow something within Cecile. It relieved the king's heart greatly to see how things had turned out. Back when Cecile asked him for a birthday present for the first time, the Luana leaf, Kane and his wife shared a celebratory toast over it. And when the time came, he'd be pushing more of his duties to Cecile so he could relax. By the end of their drink, the king passed out on the table. Cecile knew if he told Bertia about the blood the royal family carried, he'd be able to bind her to him for the rest of their lives. But he didn't want a marionette that'd do whatever he said. He wanted the woman that ran in wild ways he couldn't predict. It was like a surprising jack-in-the-box he loved. More than anything else, he wanted to be a version of himself that she'd choose of her own free will. His mother came in saying, "Oh dear, I just knew things would turn out this way." Cecile assumed his father just felt a great weight lifted off him. His mother could see he knew, and suddenly kissed him affectionately on his head, telling him they were so proud of him. But if he made Bertia cry, she never forgave him. As she and the butler carried his father away, Cecile uttered his thanks to his parents. 2 years later, Bertia had written a list of the top 100 things she wanted to do at her wedding, which included being celebrated with a shower of flowers and being carried away like a princess. However, her little brother Aneth would never allow this wedding. It will soon be 2 years since Cecile graduated from the academy. The day he weds Tia is close at hand, which is why he dropped by Noche's house to pay his respects. But Aneth whined, "No, my big sister's going to stay here forever. Go away." As soon as Cecile arrived, Tia's younger brother began scowling at him. The child that once caused rampant rumors of Tia being pregnant, her significantly younger brother. His deeply ingrained sister complex seems to have stunted his growth, since Cecile will be stealing his sister away via marriage. Aneth sees him as his enemy. Bertia apologized on Aneth's behalf, but Cecile could see he seemed happy about it. Cecile did not blame the young boy though. Had he been in Aneth's position, he'd have found a reliable way to break off the engagement. Since this wasn't causing real harm, Cecile decided to leave it be. Aneth suddenly shouted he'd be marrying his big sister, so Cecile should just go be with the heroine. His words caused the atmosphere to freeze over. Bertia got nervous with Cecile asking her to explain. Aneth continued on about how Cecile was handsome enough to have a harem, and since his sister was the villainess, she couldn't be with any of the capture targets. Bertia tried to explain she was only speaking to herself, and Aneth overheard her. Aneth cleared up she wasn't talking to herself. She said it in her sleep, and he listened to her sleep ramblings very attentively. Cecile thought Tia was so silly. He apologized to Aneth, but he was taking his sister for himself. That was their destiny. Aneth screeched in tears. He knew the prince was just pretending to be princely, but he's secretly the Demon King. Cecile did not like that title. Bertia swore she never said anything like that. She loved Cecile from the bottom of her heart. It wasn't her who said that though. Aneth heard it from their father. Now he was on the chopping block. The Marquis made the excuse he came to resent Cecile for stealing his daughter, and it slipped out. Cecile knelt down towards Aneth and asked him if he didn't think the Demon King and villainess would make a good couple. Aneth glimmered as he asked his sister to confirm. Bertia got excited. The idea was a brilliant one she hadn't considered. A love between the villainess and Demon King. She's certain it'll be the most wonderful story. Cecile didn't mean for her to take it that far though. She apologized to Aneth. Her imagination ran wild as per usual. Cecile cleared up to the boy that even with Tia becoming his bride, she'd still remain his sister. In fact, he'd gained Cecile as an older brother. Even though Bertia wouldn't live here anymore, Aneth could visit them whenever he wanted. Cecile could see Aneth just needed a little nudge. He added that he and Bertia would prepare delicious sweets and wait for him at the palace. Aneth got more excited. He had to ask once again if that meant Cecile wouldn't be mean to his sister, if going to him would make his sister happy. She smiled and told him it would. She told him this love she thought would never, ever take root has blossomed. She's happier than she's ever been. And with that, Aneth happily accepted their relationship full of love. They pinky promised on it. With that settled, Douglas grabbed Cecile's shoulder. He wanted them to have a drink together, man to man, swearing it was nothing too serious. He simply wished to show his gratitude. A few days later, the wedding bells rang. The people cheered to congratulate the royal couple on their marriage, and they waved back to the people. At the venue, Bertia was nervous at being separated from Cecile for this short time. Kuro came up to Cecile to give him a book Bertia wrote, called Wedding Ceremony, List of Things I Want to Do, Top 100. He tried to thank Kuro for bringing his attention to this while offering her inari or sushi later, and Kuro smacked his hand away. She seemed satisfied with the response, but still didn't like him touching her. Cecile wanted to do as many things as he could in this book. His bride-to-be deserved to be the happiest in the whole world. Standing before the altar, Cecile listened to the pleasant sound of the wedding music. Douglas entered in with Bertia, and watching them, Cecile thought this was just like the first time he met her. He only intended to entertain himself by observing her, but one step at a time, they grew closer, and now he'd take her hand in his and walk onward. The Marquis grabbed at his back, begging Cecile to please take care of his daughter. Perhaps it was because he was holding back, but his tears looked scarier than usual. Tia tripped on her dress, and Cecile caught her. Supporting his wife is a husband's duty, after all. Whatever they may face, they'd find a way through. He didn't want her to worry. Everyone watched as the priest gave his declarations for the ceremony. This part was really long, so Cecile considered thinking about their fun honeymoon plans instead. Tia had told him about places called onsen inns before. The king was called next to bestow the seals of the crown prince and princess. On behalf of the royal family, he presented 2 rings. Normally, the custom was for them to take their own and place it on their fingers, but Cecile decided to place hers on her finger and kissed it, and all the girls gushed. Putting rings on each other's fingers was on Bertia's top 100 list. Cecile especially liked it because it felt like he was shackling her to him. He had her do his next, and thinking about how she did it of her own free will, it made him happy for some reason. Cecile lifted her veil and said, Bertia ibil alfasta. I, Cecile, glow alfasta. In sickness and in health, in happy times and sad times, in times of abundance and in times of need. Through whatever hardships we may face, I will love, honor, and console you and aid you. Even if this life of mine should end, I swear that I will continue to hold you dear. The 2 kissed, and Cecile could sense the incredible amount of bloodlust coming off of Douglas, while also observing that Bertia seemed frozen in place. Bertia snapped out of her daze and stammered, I, Bertia, ibil alfasta. No matter what circumstances may be, Sir Cecile, I swear that I will always love you, even if death should separate us. The crowd was in awe. It was definitely abbreviated from how the vows were supposed to be, but Cecile was glad she felt satisfied. She could entertain him in any situation. He then suggested she seal her vow with a kiss. Even though they had just kissed, he'd really like a vow from her, too. Normally, Kuro would show up at this time, but Zeno had her stopped for him. Cecile got his kiss, and Bertia quickly turned away out of nervousness. Cecile wasn't expecting this strange sensation that felt like heat gathering around his face. His heart was beating more furiously than ever. He felt fidgety, and sort of like he wanted to scream. Bertia asked if he was perhaps feeling shy. Now he can see it. This was the overwhelming feeling of embarrassment. He couldn't bear to meet Tia's sparkling gaze properly. He managed to recover so they could sign the official document. And with this, their marriage was officially recognized. Glory to the kingdom of Alfasta. All's concluded. However, Cecile wasn't done checking things off of Bertia's top 100 list. Lately, Cecile's been doing a lot of paperwork, so he's slightly worried he's lost some physical strength. Tia's garments look elegant at first glance, but the ornamentation that has been applied is actually quite heavy. In the name of dieting, Tia's exercised daily. She held the dress up to herself and spun around in front of the mirror, but every time the dress needed to be moved, it required 3 attendants to do it. Cecile suddenly picks her up, and the girls squeal. It was quite a bit of weight, but this was another item on her list. After the wedding ceremony, I want to be carried off like a princess. She tried talking to him, but he kissed her on the cheek and sent her into a daze again. Though there were things that differed from the customs of this kingdom, in general, the female guests seemed to be reacting positively. However, the guys were a bit nervous with him setting the bar so high. Next on the list, the bouquet toss. The ladies turned on predator eyes to be the one to catch, and hopefully find their future husband. Since they were doing so many things that had never been done in the kingdom before, Cecile sent letters of explanation to their guests from other countries. Before he knew it, Tia's friends and other unmarried ladies, numbering roughly 20, were participating in what has become quite a large event. Bertia did her toss, and it was on. Kudo's instincts triggered, and she caught it immediately, presenting it before Bertia, and Bertia had to tell her this wasn't a game of fetch. Cecile couldn't help but crack up. Bertia explained the meaning of this to her familiar, and now Kudo began to eye Zeno as her future husband. Ooh. Heading to their carriage, Cecile warned Zeno to never make a move on a young girl. But Spirit's physical appearance is merely a guise, so their looks and age are unrelated. Cecile couldn't have rumors going around that his attendant was a pedo, though. Cecile and Bertia received so much congratulations riding through the city. The flower shower tossed by the people was also on Bertia's list. Zeno went to ask the flower spirits for help, and they granted him many flower petals. Cecile was happy to see Bertia so happy. After that, they fulfilled essential customs like having their first dance, cutting their wedding cake, and that night, they stood at a palace balcony and looked at the moon together. Bertia was so thankful. It seemed like Cecile knew exactly what she wanted, and he thought she would have realized he read her book list by now. He handed it to her, and she wondered how he got it. She felt so embarrassed, but it made their special day so memorable. They then kissed under the moonlight. A few days later, they left on their honeymoon trip. They had cans tied to their carriage, another item on her list. Cecile thought the world she came from sure had some very curious customs. On their way, Bertia spotted rabbit parents and their babies. They were so cute. She hoped she and Cecile could have a family like that. She was certain any child of his was bound to be adorable, their face looking just like his and hair like hers. But then, she got embarrassed over what she just said. However, Cecile was also hoping to see a girl with his hair color who looked just like her. He asked her to build a happy family with him, and she loved the idea. 1 year later, Cecile thought about how Tia seemed to have grown accustomed to life in the palace. However, she seems to be very busy as of late. After their wedding, the royal families and nobility of various countries consulted her about their own ceremonies, one after another. Quite unexpectedly, their wedding must have left quite a profound impression. In addition, Tia's wedding information magazine, Bertie, has been published, and it's enjoying tremendous favor with the public. He wondered how many times she'd surprise him as they moved forward from here. The observation log on her he'd been writing seems likely to continue for quite some time. She'd hurriedly come to him and say something we, the viewer, can't even hear. And all Cecile can think about is how he's never bored with her. Wow. Is she preggers, guys? What do you think? What a great ending to this series. So far, I think this is my shoujo of the year. A lot of interesting drama and spectacle to this story, especially with it being told entirely from the male lead's perspective. Cecile's development throughout is very satisfying, and so is the downfall of Heronia. Can't forget that. Easily give this the 9 or 10 out of 10 must-watch for anyone who enjoys the Victorian fantasy and isekai romance genre. But, as always, I want to hear what you guys think. Subscribe for more stories, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.